Edwile suggested. Running his hands across his legs in an effort to dry off the sweat, he nodded quickly. Aye, good idea, let's go. Lewin practically shooed the two brothers out of the chambers. As soon as they stepped out of the boundary, the door was closed on them. As he and Edwile began walking away, he noticed that Grey Wind remained outside the door, curling up just to the right of it. He hoped that his wife would be safe, and he'd have a child in her arms the next time he saw her. Catelyn Stark. Her uncle had provided a simple, yet nourishing meal for their supper. Unlike other great keeps and castles, the Bloody Gate was exclusively a military structure. As such, it was designed in a way to hinder the enemy in any way, shape or form. There was no great hall, and they enjoyed their evening meal in a modestly sized chamber. She awoke and had dressed herself. After helping herself to some black pudding and a fried egg, she left the main keep and strode to the stables. She was one of the last people to ready herself. Her uncle had provided an additional escort of 50 men to ensure her arrival at the Eyrie. Mounting herself, she led the hardy horse over to the stairs of the main keep where her uncle was standing. Uncle, thank you so much for your kindness. Should you require anything at all, let me know at once. I shall ensure your every need is met. Bowing from the waist slightly, he smiled. It was an honor of mine, my Lady Regent. She blushed despite herself. I'll have none of that, I am still your little cat. He chuckled at that. Aye, that you are. Safe travels. Nodding, she turned her mount and took up her formation behind the lead pack leader. The knight in command was Sir Henrik Belmore, the third son of Lord Benedar Belmore. Turning at her presence, he offered a kind smile. Ready, my lady. Yes, good sir. He flashed a great smile and put his helm on. Let's ride. Yeah. The horses took over running. No wonder the Vale is known for their cavalry. Her party had ridden at a moderate gallop for about half an hour. After such shows of chivalry, Sir Henrik elected to set a quick walking pace for the horses. She was told that the Bloody Gate was only about 7 leagues or so from the Eyrie. A straight trail would have been able to accomplish such a distance in only a handful of hours. However, the terrain of the Vale was, naturally, difficult to say the least. After about the first quarter of the first league, the mountainous features hindered the fast riding of the party. Sir Henrik estimated that they should reach the Eyrie by the time the sun began to set, if not sooner. Thankfully, by now, her party had already passed more than halfway for travel. This marked two things for her. 1. Only a short more time to go. She was never the best rider, and she was growing uncomfortable already in the saddle. And 2, according to her escorts, they had passed the point that the mountain clans would have already attacked them. She elected to safely trot her horse a few paces faster to catch up with Sir Henrik. Though she had nothing of note to say, she decided it was good manners to engage in conversation. Sir. She respectfully initiated. Turning his head sideways to meet her eyes, he gently nodded his head to let her keep talking. I was unaware that any other houses had sent their sons to the Bloody Gate. Oh yes. While Sir Brynden is the Knight of the Gate, there are a number of other officers as well. He said kindly. In all honesty, she was uninterested in the details but elected to learn more about it anyway. She'd have to after all as regent. And what are they? Well, Sir Henrik cut himself off as he redirected his mount from a sharp rock. Pardon, my lady. In addition to the knight, there is a keeper, a gatekeeper, and 4 underkeepers. The keeper serves as the knight's official right-hand man. Unfortunately, after the death of Sir Miles Hersey at the hands of the mountain clans, there has not been a new one. I've no doubt that Lord Royce will be appointing a new one soon. The gatekeeper is more unique than the title lets on. While they are indeed responsible for carrying the keys to the gate, they serve as the other lieutenant to the knight, usually stepping up to acting keeper if one is not present. They are also the master-at-arms for the gate in tandem. Currently, Sir Jay Tolet serves as the gatekeeper of the Bloody Gate. Sounds like quite the system. What do the others do? The last officers are the 4 underkeepers. Each of the 4 rotate to serve as the officer of the watch for a 2-day span. In addition, we lead parties to combat the clans, to send messages, to serve as escorts, and to do all other orders that the Knight of the Bloody Gate gives us. In an attempt to lighten the otherwise boring topic, Seriously, I am close to falling off my horse in boredom. And I assume you are one of those underkeepers. She chuckled. He smiled back, taking no offense at the amusing tone. Yes, my lady. I serve as one of the underkeepers along with Sir Landon Shetty, Sir Michael Templeton, and Sir Donald Wainwood. Do you enjoy it? Very much so. It is a great experience, a time of learning. It is nice to be trained with arms, but to be able to test your leadership is another benefit. At this, he leaned closer to her. It also helps with future endeavors. He spoke softly as if it were a secret. At this point, she was just responding so as not to be rude, starting to regret speaking to the talkative knight. Oh, how so? Serving as an officer at the Bloody Gate is a wonderful way to have your name be remembered. Many of the recorded knights of the Bloody Gate had served as an officer previously. Your good uncle is among the small minority to not have served as an officer previously, no offense meant, my lady. That perked her up. If a new appointment was necessary, there was much more politics included than she previously thought. She decided to test the waters to speak. You know, Sir Henrik, my uncle, while experienced, is getting on in years. Tell me honestly, who do you think will succeed him, if it was in fact one of the current officers? He attempted to deflect by laughing. Well, my lady, I couldn't possibly begin to. Please, good sir, give me your honest opinion. Very well. Sir Jay is a good man, true and sound. But he is also getting older as well. To be open, I am surprised he has not resigned yet already. Perhaps because he wouldn't leave Sir Brynden without any senior officers. Of myself and the other three, I'd say either myself or Sir Donald. And now, to pry. And why is that? Sir Landon Shett's appointment was more for his family than him. Oh, he'll do his duty, no doubt. But I always suspected that he would feel better back in Gull Tower, by the water. As for Sir Michael Templeton, it is the exact opposite. He had always wanted to serve at the gate, but his father was against it. After the next appointment, his father made him promise to resign and return home. Which leaves you and Sir Donald. Yes. He's a good knight too. Honorable and courageous. Although I wish it, I feel that he would most likely be chosen. He is dedicated to the gate, supported by his family, and proven himself to both Sir Brynden and Lord Arryn. But what of you, do you not have your own dreams? Perhaps, my lady, but I'm a third son. In the Vale, there are not many places to rise. I am no fan of tourneys, and I find the wall to be too finite. Besides the gate, there are not many places to rise. I'd be honored to be appointed as any of the senior officers. And would you? I imagine it can be difficult. Oh yes, it is. The knight, the keeper, and the gatekeeper are all appointed by Lord Arryn. The 4 underkeepers are all appointed by the knight with tentative approval from Lord Arryn. Becoming an officer is difficult. Becoming one of the senior officers is incredibly rare. Deciding to end the conversation, she took a tone as such. Well, continue to impress me, and I'll put in a good word, I promise. And that's when it opened up. The scenery. They had been along a mountain path for hours when they reached the crest. And then they saw it. The Eyrie, in all its glory. Just about half a league away was the Gates of the Moon. Once they reached there, her escort would leave her as the rest of the journey was completely safe. Most likely they'd receive another escort as ceremonial announcers. Sir Henrik must have seen her face. First time, my lady. He smirked at her. It was difficult to keep her jaw from dropping open. Winterfell was a mighty castle. A clod, barren, fortress that demanded respect, and dealt harsh wounds. But the Eyrie was a majestic castle. It had no need for curtain walls when it sat atop a spiring peak. The party had stopped when she and Sir Henrik had halted to admire the view. He leaned over to her, as if to excite her for a surprise. Ready to ascend the giant's lance. Robb Stark. He and Edwyle had prayed in the Godswood for over an hour. After he became too restless to kneel, he asked to spar with his brother. But soon, even that was not enough to keep his mind off of the present situation. Finally, his father had taken him and walked around the perimeter of the castle, quite the walk indeed. They conversed from talks about his father's past, to lessons, and everything else. It was soon sundown. It had been over half the day since Daisy began to show signs of giving birth. It was not too soon when a guard rushed to them, informing them that the maester had summoned them. It was fortunate that they had been outside, away from the thick walls of the keep. Observing the faces of the servants and workers, evidently it had not been a quiet birth. He wondered how loudly his she-bear of a wife roared. As he made the final turn down the hall, father stopped walking. Sensing this, he turned around. "Father, what's wrong?" His father gave him a small, kind smile. "Go, Rob, meet your child. I shall greet them soon enough. Have this time with your wife, by yourselves." At this, Edwile, Sansa, and Arya had reached father. He held them back with an arm. He nodded appreciatively to him before taking the final paces down the hall. Reaching the door, she opened it. Inside, the maester was sitting in a chair. There was a lot of blood covering his apron. To the side, one of the midwives was washing some clothes in a bucket of water, no doubt to hang and dry. And then he saw her. His dear wife. They shared many memories together. They had sparred together, they had laughed together, they had a few fights amongst each other. But they never saw love between them. Or so he thought. But seeing her laying there, sweat adorning her face, breathing as if she had just fought a battle, which she most certainly has. She turned to him and the smile she gave him warmed his heart. Perhaps love could blossom between them. She never looked more beautiful than she did now. And in her arms, lay a bundle of furs. He stood there, in the doorframe, frozen. Unsure of what to do. Maester Lewin looked at him and gave him a kind smile. "Lady Daisy did splendidly, my lord. The babe's healthy too." He gestured for him to go further. Finally finding his courage, Rob approached the bed and sat at the end. He leaned over to kiss his wife above her brow. And then he looked down. It was so peaceful. She told him that the babe had cried up a storm but had thankfully gone to sleep. "So, what is the child?" "Rob. Meet your son." And Daisy handed over his child at that moment. Gods, what if I drop him? And then he was shoved into his arms. Right then, he knew he would protect his son from anything, no matter what. Maester Lewin waddled over, no doubt tired himself from such an experience. "My lord, lady. I'll need a name, to put in the records." He smiled kindly. He knew this was a special moment. He looked into the eyes of his wife, searching for ideas. But she shook her head. Speaking much more softly than normal, she spoke. "It's yours, Rob." We agreed. "I shall name our daughters, and you, our sons." Although it felt unfair in the moment, Daisy was encouraging. He looked at his son for many moments, before turning and looking Lewin in the eyes. "Winterfell, and the North, will welcome Samsin Stark to the world." Notes. So I have always been tired of fanfics naming a new Stark as Torrhen or Cregan or Eddard. It is boring. So I did some research into other northern names, as well as their naming conventions themselves. I came to the finals two possible names of either Samsin or Rodwell. Rodwell is a historical Stark name, with at least one Rodwell Stark serving as Lord of Winterfell post Aegon the Conqueror. Samsin was a lot more original, but felt stronger and more creative. The name is pronounced like the modern counterpart, Samson, minus the P. Samsin. Chapter 13, The Pack Divides, and a Wolf Grows Wings. Notes. Asterisk so as for the previous chapter, Samsin is pronounced as, Samsin. Asterisk asterisk for the purposes of my story, I have decided to go more in depth for House Royce in this story. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter text. 298 AC. Catelyn Stark. Her party had reached the gates of the moon very soon after they had crested the final hill. When they reached the gates, the keeper of the gates of the moon, Lord Nestor Royce, greeted her in the inner courtyard. Thought the man had been polite, he was blunt, and she got the impression that he did not want to speak to her much. Sir Henrik, before excusing himself to sleep in the barracks, had explained the reason. Apparently when Lord Arryn had been in the capital for so many years, he had appointed Lord Nestor as the High Steward of the Vale. It made sense to her then. Though he did not comment on it, it was obvious to her that his pride was hurt by not being chosen by Lord Arryn to serve as one of his co-regents. She had dined with the man along with his daughter, Myranda Royce, for her evening meal, electing to complete the final journey on the morrow. From her understanding, his cousin, Lord Yohn Royce had reached the gates the morning she had reached the Bloody Gates. As such, he only had one more day ahead of her to make the Eyrie his temporary home. "If you could, who was among Lord Royce's party?" she had asked. "My cousin brought his daughter, Zillah, along with her betrothed, Sir Michael Redfort. In addition, he brought the customary household of his and a complement of 20 of his guardsmen. He also brought his master-at-arms as his close assistant." "And what of his sons?" "I know that his youngest took the black some time ago, but he had others. Surely he'd wish to bring them along." "His eldest, Sir Andor, has remained behind to serve as the acting Lord of Runestone. Though my cousin's grandson, son of Sir Andor, has joined him as well. I had no idea that Lord Royce had any grandchildren yet." From what she remembered, all 4 of his children had been unmarried as of yet. "Oh yes, my lady. Sir Andor had married Lady Maria Moore, sister to Sir Mandon of the Kingsguard. They had 3 children. 2 daughters that my cousin dotes over, and 1 son. Sir Andor is currently trying to find a new wife after Lady Maria passed on the birthing bed." "And what of his middle son?" "Romar. Roman, Robar, my lady." "Sir Robar. I am unaware of his current location as of now. I simply assumed that he had stayed at Runestone as well." "I see. Many thanks. No doubt Lord Royce wishes that his grandson, what is his name?" "Allard, my lady. No doubt he wishes for his grandson Allard to grow up with his future liege lord." She put on a kind smile. But Lord Nestor just slowly drank from his chalice while muttering, "Yes, to grow with his future liege lord. No doubt." She realized that Lord Nestor Royce was going to be a hindrance to any radical changes. He was already envious of his cousin and felt cheated. She'd have to think of ways of bringing him into the fold, or permanently shutting him out. Just like the previous day at the Bloody Gate, she awoke to a simple meal. She was almost begging to have a bath drawn up for herself but decided against it. She just wished to finish her trip now. It had been a long road and it was so close to being done. When she reached the courtyard, she watched as Sir Henrik and his men were preparing to return to the Bloody Gate. He saw her as she left the keep. "My lady, I wish you all the best," he shouted from atop his mount. "Thank you very much for your work, good sir. I shall not soon forget it." He nodded without responding, offered a smile, and turned. His riders following him as they thundered back down the road which they had just taken. It was oddly quiet in the courtyard without the neighing of horses and the shouting of men at arms. But just as it seemed like all the sound in the world was sucked from the air, soft noises once again returned. The greatest came from the winds, the mighty gales that swept through the mountains this high up. She turned as Lord Nestor strode over to her. "My lady. Your party is prepared to leave at your word." This he turned to gesture to a man with mighty chops to his right. "Is my son, Albar. He shall serve as your chaperone until you reach the Eyrie." Bowing, she thanked him with honeyed words before mounting herself. It was time to finally meet her nephew, Eddard Stark. The time had come for him to leave Winterfell. He was very happy he had managed to make Robert agree to allowing him 1 more month to remain. Many happy occurrences took place in the past 2 fortnights. For one, he had met his first grandchild. A sweet boy that Robb named Samzin. It was an unusual name, for sure. But it fits well. He had Lewyn send a raven to the Eyrie to notify his wife. She hadn't gotten there yet but he was sure she was close. In a moment of complete sanguine, Bran had awoken from his deep sleep, much to the enraged prospects. Robb and Edwyle had been sparring in the yard while he had been in his solar. A guard rushed in alerting him of a commotion occurring in his young son's chambers. Arya had been sitting in his chambers when an assassin entered wielding a knife. The catspaw had slapped Arya across the face and had turned to Bran. Thankfully, both Blizzard and Nymeria had been in the room and had jumped on the assassin. Once Arya had arisen, she brandished her small dagger and stabbed the man in the leg. Though to her it was meant as a wounding strike, she must have nicked an artery, for the man had died within moments. He had run out of the room with the direwolf mother, who he had named Fury. Reaching the room, it seemed the only calm thing present was his son Bran, still asleep in his bed. Arya had actually recovered from being hit and was excited that she had protected her brother. Eddard was quite irate after the incident. He had given both Sir Roderick and Sir Jorah a stern talking to about the security of his castle if assassins can enter at any time. He had sat with Bran alone, asking him if he had remembered anything from the day he fell. His son explained that his mind was still fuzzy. "My mind is unclear, father. Like a cloud. I am always so close to remembering before it escapes my grasp. Fear not, Brandon. Allow your mind to heal. Should you remember after I left, feel free to share it with Robb or Maester Lewin. They will be able to make a call if they should inform me." But regardless, Brandon had awoken. After consulting with Maester Lewin, a tentative prognosis was made. One of Bran's legs would be permanently damaged, while the other one would heal in time. According to Lewin, the worse-off leg could be fitted for a brace, to help with walking. Perhaps he'd never be a knight like he wished, but he'd live, he would walk once more, and he'd be able to ride with a horse trained for him. It was far better than they all expected. Arya's face became bruised in the following days, but unlike other little ladies, true to her spirit, she bore it with pride. Bothering all the guards and the household with telling stories of her pride in defending her brother. Both Robb and Edwyle had become down at the news. Since Bran's fall, at least one of them would be usually sitting with Bran. This time being only a handful of times where neither of them were. It took to personal word of Bran and Arya to settle their morose moods. And finally, he had finalized the plans for Sansa's marriage. Willers Tyrell was the obvious choice, the heir to one of the most powerful kingdoms and a reportedly kind man at that. But according to Sansa, she wished for happiness, and so they agreed that Edric Dane was a better match. And silently, he himself was happy at the prospect of not having to deal with the infamous Queen of Thorns. On the other hand, Edric was a man her age. He worshipped the old gods, so his bannermen would be more open to it. Further, Sansa had a chance to truly bloom in Dorne. Highgarden, and the Reach, were firmly in the hands of Willers Tyrell and his grandmother. On the other hand, Dorne was still open for influencing, he hoped. He knew from his steward, Veon Poole, who also served as his treasurer, that it was an economically poor choice to not pursue the Tyrells. But the North could always seek what they needed from the Riverlands, the Crown Lands, and actually Dorne as well. He had a feeling that the Tyrells did not possess such a strong grip on the Reach as they would like others to believe. Call it a gut feeling or a lord's intuition, he was just uncomfortable with that family. But his choice, and Sansa's exuberant agreement also meant that he would not leave the North with only himself and a small army, but also his eldest daughter. Lord Edric was currently under the tutelage of Lord Beric of House Dondarrion. Last he heard from Robert, the Lightning Lord called the Halls of the Red Keep his current home, if temporary. It would be a good place for his daughter to meet her betrothed, and then he could send them on their way. Even with the absence of Lannister soldiers, in the pit of snakes that was King's Landing, no one was truly safe. But enough of that. Time was at hand. Already, there was a force of 400 guardsmen waiting for him, his daughter, and Ser Jorah. Most of his escorts, roughly 350 guards, were of the Winter Guard, while the last of the men, about 50, were the elite hunters of the Guard. They were the smallest of the 1,000-man-strong Winterfell honor guard force. Roughly 100 were hunters, another 700 served as heavy foot, though when traveling they could ride as well. And the last 200 was a dedicated cavalry unit. He left half of the hunters, all the cavalry, and 300 of the guardsmen with Robb with instructions to raise their replacements. Regardless, he hoped that their journey would be safe and unassuming. Their horses were not the only bestial companions either. Along the horses would run both Fury and Lady, their direwolves. Sansa had agreed that she would only take a light portion of her belongings and dresses. The rest could be shipped at a later date to Starfall. As such, many of her not as personal belongings were shared in the knapsacks of his riders. Because of this, they required no wheelhouse and could make excellent time. Time to say my farewells. His family arranged before him reminded him of when Robert first rode into the castle. This time however, it was Rob who stood strong at the far left. He started with him. Rob. You have my instructions, and my advice. But lean on Edwile if you need to, he'll always be there for you. Rob nodded in thanks, as he turned to Daisy who held Samzin in her arms. Rob said his farewells to Sansa. My good daughter, I am so happy for you and Rob. I know you'll raise him right. They embraced in a hug before he spoke in her ear. Be there for Rob. He puts on a good face, but I can see through it. Don't let him spiral. Leaving the embrace, she responded with mirth in her eyes. I think that I shall always be here for him, me lord. He nodded in thanks before turning to his second son. Edwile, be patient with Rob. I know you sometimes think that your ideas are the best ideas, but remember that Rob is now the acting Lord of Winterfell. Impress on him all your advice and ideas, but recognize his word is final. Of course father, safe travels. Then he came to the newest generation's wild wolf. Arya, I am so proud of the woman you are growing up to be. Be there for your brothers. She straightened up as if she were armoring for battle. Nothing'll get if I have any say in the matter. She yelled fiercely. He drew her in for a tight embrace as well. Arya, my dear one, I know how much you resent it, but with both your mother and Sansa gone for Winterfell, Lady Daisy will be taking the brunt of the responsibilities of the Lady of Winterfell. Be there for her. You may not like it, but it is just as important as defending your brothers. She wore a minor frown but agreed. Yes father. Good, I know that you shan't let me down. He made his way down the line to Brandon. It pained him to see his young son sentenced to a wheelchair for the moment, but his mood always heightened when he was reminded that he shall walk once more. Brandon, I cannot express how sorry I am to be leaving you now. I hope you will find it in you to forgive your father for this. His son was struggling not to cry but still managed to croak out, I could never hate you father, be safe. Bran held his arms out in his wish to be embraced. Finishing up with Bran, he finished with his youngest child, Rickon, holding hands with Maester Lewyn. Rickon. The boy drifted further behind Lewyn's robes. Rickon, come here, here now. Slowly the boy walked forward. Why you leave? Your father has to help his king. Why? You know how Rob is your brother. Not. Well, the king is like that, for me. You and King Broders. Not like you and Rob. But we are still very much alike. So why you go? He chuckled softly to himself. This could go on for hours. Come here. He wrapped his arms around Rickon tightly, more so than any of his other children. Papa will come back Rickon, I will come back. Rising from his knee, he looked at Lewyn. Fear not my lord, I shall watch over young Rickon. Thank you Lewyn, you have always been a trusted advisor. He turned to mount his horse as Sansa said her final farewells. She turned and mounted her horse as well. Looking at him, she was waiting for his word. He had never been the best at farewells, so he elected to do them quickly. Looking at his family once more, he nodded at each of them, then turned and galloped out of the inner courtyard, Sansa right behind him. He didn't look back once. Catelyn Stark. Sir Albar had led her and her escort along the treacherous path of the Giant's Lance. They had passed the Way Castle of Skye and had arrived at the Eyrie proper. She heard some of the Arryn guards call for the gates to be opened to allow entry. Yipping her reins, she urged her mule forward until she had finally made it before the steps of the Great Hall. Outside stood more Arryn guards as well as a tall, broad man leading the welcoming party. He was bald but had graying sideburns and the hair on the back of his head was held together in a leather tie. His face was scarred, and he possessed a stern look in his eyes. Dismounting from her mule, she soothed the creases in her robes before walking up to the awaiting party. My lady, I am Samwell Stone, the Master-at-Arms for Runestone. Lord Royce bid me welcome you to the Eyrie. If you'll follow me. Turning, Samwell Stone began to walk through the doors to the Great Hall, into the Crescent Chambers. My lady, if you'll excuse me, I shall be notifying Lord Royce of your arrival. Please, enjoy some refreshments and warm yourself from the journey. Once more, he left to carry out his duties. She took off her overcloak and handed it to one of her Winterfell guards. She poured herself a chilled chalice of lemon water. She had never been in the Eyrie before, and it was truly glorious. The walls were of beautiful stone, unlike the harshness of Winterfell. She knew it was ill-mannered, but she decided to explore herself. She walked with her cup into what must have been the great hall. At the end was a carved weirwood throne, not dissimilar to the one in the hall of Winterfell. A mighty thing, is it not? She jumped at the sudden voice. Turning around, she gazed upon an incredibly tall man. A broad forehead led to bushy eyebrows. He let his shoulder-length white hair hang loosely and kept his wide, white beard untied. It is. She said carefully, unsure of how to treat the unknown man. The man chuckled to himself in a deep, baritone laugh. Apologies, my lady. It was remiss of me not to introduce myself. He bowed from the waist only slightly. Am Yon of the House Royce, Lord of Runestone, and I believe your co-regent. Oh, how silly of me. She gave a kind smile in return. Yes, apologies, my lord. I had never been to the Eyrie and wished to explore it more. I am Catelyn of House Stark. How is your lord husband, my lady? I remember young Ned when he fostered here with Lord Arryn. He is well, he will be happy to hear from you. Of course, my lady. He looked back the way he had come, looked at her, then looked back again. He seemed unsure of something until he gestured with his arm. My lady, do you wish to meet your nephew? I started him on a training regimen with the Master-at-Arms and he started this morning. Yes, I would love to meet Lord Robin. Tell me, be honest, what is your opinion of my nephew? What do you think will be needed to work with? No offense meant, my lady, but your nephew is a spoilt boy. When I arrived yesterday, he was screaming, running around the halls, demanding of things, and generally unruly. I am sorry to say that I had to discipline him immediately. That is unfortunate. My lady. I fear that after your lady sister's many failed pregnancies, she held Lord Robin close. I do not blame her, of course, but I believe that you and I must hammer that behavior out of him, for it is too late. She was surprised at the bluntness of his words. She sensed they weren't meant to offend, but his honesty would be very helpful during their co-regency. The two of them had been escorted through the halls by a servant until they came to a small, open tiltyard. Raise your sword, boy. A young boy, Lord Robin, she assumed, was being yelled out by a middle-aged man. Another knight also stood by watching the entire scene too. The knight turned when he saw them and bowed deeply at the waist. My lord, my lady. I am Sir Vardis Egen, captain of the Arryn Guard. She bowed from the neck in thanks to return her attention at her nephew. Lord Royce called out to him. Lord Robin. Come and meet your lady aunt. Turning at the powerful voice, the boy looked miserable. He walked over with slumped shoulders and dragging feet. When he arrived, he looked up at her. Putting on kindest smile, she greeted her nephew for the first time. Hello, Robin. I'm your aunt, Catelyn. Your mother's sister. Yes. It is very good to meet you. Mother didn't like you. Notes. I am aware that Robin Arryn is technically named Robert Arryn. I must be honest, however, and agree with the decisions of the GOT show writers in the option to change it to Robin Arryn. TBH, it is just easier for me to remember as well. I know that the Eyrie is nigh on impregnable. According to Asoyaf, the Eyrie's entrance was either a ladder or some wicker baskets that were pulled up with pulleys and oxen, unless I read the Asoyaf wiki incorrectly. I want to keep it as accurate as the novels, but I decided that there should at least be a small courtyard for mules and hardy horses. I am aware that recently, I have focused on the Stark parents and others, but I needed to do this to move the plot. Fear not, I shall go back to Robb and Edwyle's POV soon. Chapter 14, Growing Pains. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. 298 AC. Robb Stark. As per your orders, I have been able to recruit 100 more green boys. I'll have them trained as soon as possible, though I will not rush it. Very good, Sir Rodrik. I agree, I do not wish to threaten the effectiveness of the Winterfell Guard. Besides, there are no great threats at the moment to rush training regardless. My thoughts exactly. Have you any other orders? Robb perked up at this. Yes, actually. My brother Edwile deserves to see his new seat of Moat Cailin sooner rather than later. Prepare a party for him, I think he'll be leaving sometime within the Senate. Of course. Lord Rob, forgive me but, I was unaware if your father began investing in the moat's reconstruction. Nay, unfortunately he was unable to get to that particular order of business for he left. Regardless, I am the acting Lord of Winterfell. I'll have Veon prepare a cache of 200 silver stags, to accompany Edwile. I'll also write to Lord Marndale requesting a master builder to be sent from White Harbour. Very well, my lord. Is there anything else? No, you're dismissed. Standing from the chair, Sir Roderick bowed and then turned and left, leaving Rob alone in his my father's solar. He still felt uncomfortable by it. He found himself questioning every decision he made. Would father have done this? Would father have done it differently? Would he step into moderate between two bickering lords? He was not alone however, thank the gods for that. He and Daisy grew very close, closer than they already were, after the birth of their son. Daisy finally went so far as to threaten harm to Maester Lewin if he confined her to a bed one more day. Already, she was working herself in Winterfell's tiltyard. She was still not close to her previous skill, after being barred for the last 3 months or so. But her feet and arms remembered their former moves. But enough about his own shortcomings. He had work to do. Going into one of father's drawers, he pulled out 2 fresh sheets of parchment and put it on the desk. The desk was well over 100 years old. Made from ironwood, stained and polished with beeswax. It had apparently replaced an older ironwood table that had been in use for centuries, even before the arrival of Aegon I, when the Starks still ruled as the kings of winter. Setting the parchment down, he moved the quill and inkwell to a more comfortable position to the upper, right-hand side of the desk. Easier for him to dip and reapply ink to his quill if needed. Before he began writing, he put some wax pellets into the crucible and lit the small candle neath it to begin melting. Hopefully by the time he was finished, the was ready to be sealed. Lord Wyman Marndale. Lord of White Harbour and Warden of the White Knife. Lord Marndale, I trust you are aware that my Lord Father recently named my brother, Edwile Stark, as the Lord of Moat Cailin and the Defender of the Causeway. His seat, however, is in ruins. It would lighten my heart if you would join with House Stark in rebuilding of the once great, ancient fortress. I am sure that with your assistance, my brother can find capable men and women from White Harbour to join his household. As such, I humbly request that you find a capable master builder within White Harbour. Once done, please send them to the ruins of Moat Cailin. I welcome any knights or servants or family you wish to send as well. Worry not, House Stark shall take on the full commission of whatever builder you find. In addition, worry not about large expenses, the rebuilding of Moat Cailin shall take time. The wall was not built in a day after all. It would be remiss of me to unknowingly cause you confusion. Edwile shall not take up immediate residency at Moat Cailin yet. Until he is of age, the moat is in shape to house a permanent household, or until my father's decree, Edwile shall remain at Winterfell. I thank you for any assistance you may provide. Winter is coming. Lord Robb Stark. Acting Lord of Winterfell and Acting Lord Paramount and Warden of the North. To the Lords of the North. It is with great happiness that I am able to inform you of the birth of my first child and son, Samzin Stark. Samzin was born a healthy babe and is strong and as fearsome as any son of winter. I can also report that Lady Daisy Stark faced the birthing bed as a true northerner, strength, courage, and conviction in her heart. She has made a full recovery and is as healthy as she ever was. Although it is customary to send gifts as a congratulatory respect, I humbly beseech thee to hold off on such an act. Instead, I request, that any gift that is made of either coin, men, or supplies, and to be sent to the ruins of Moat Cailin, where the ancient fortress is to be rebuilt over the next many, many years. Only send what you can, winter is coming. Lord Robb Stark. Acting Lord of Winterfell and Acting Lord Paramount and Warden of the North. He had put aside his first letter to finish the second. Switching them, he once again held the first letter in his hands. Reaching over to a small bucket neath the desk, he grabbed a small handful of sawdust and sprinkled it over the still wet ink. Allowing it some moments to soak up all the excess ink, he held the parchment vertically and allowed the sawdust to fall off into a second bucket. He did the same with the second letter. Guard. He looked up as one of the two guards outside the solar stepped in. Me, Lord. Ah, Kyne. Fetch me Maester Lewin, please. Bowing, Kyne went off to fetch the Maester. In the meantime, Rob folded the first letter to Lord Mandaily specifically, into a respectably small size. Holding down the creased edges, he grabbed the small handle of the wax crucible, and poured a small amount onto the center of the folds. Still holding the folded paper down, he twisted his signet ring to center, and pressed down hard on the cooling wax, leaving an imprint of a direwolf. A knock came from the door. Come. Kyne walked in with Lewin behind him. Maester Lewin as requested, me lord. Thank you Kyne, you're dismissed. Kyne once again bowed and left, closing the door behind him. My lord, you wished to see me. Yes Lewin, thank you for coming. Two things I need done. First, this is a letter that must be sent directly to Lord Mandaily of White Harbour. He picked up the sealed letter and gave it to him. Very good, my lord. I shall see that the raven flies quickly. Good. The other issue I need assistance with is copying. This he held up the other letter addressed to all the lords. Is a letter announcing the birth of my son to the lords of the north. Please see to it that a copy is made for every lord. I shall see it done Lord Rob, though I must warn you. Copying so many letters will take time. I am aware. I will let Veon know, and you may conscript any servant who knows their letters to assist in your duties. Thank you, my lord. After the copies are made, shall I return them to you for any final additions? Rob thought about it for a time. On one hand, he knew Lewin would automatically correct any potential spelling mistakes he had unknowingly made. He then thought that perhaps if something happened, he'd need to include the new information. But he quickly dissuaded himself of that notion. If anything of that magnitude was needed, other ravens or messengers could be sent. Nay. Once they are completed, you may send them out to all the lords. Very well. Is there anything else? No. You may go Lewin. My lord. He bowed once before he too left. Rob was silent for a moment before he released a large sigh. To young boys, being a lord looked like nothing more than being a warrior. But studying with his father for years, and finally being entrusted with the largest kingdom of the realm, made him realize that the art of administration and logistics was just as important as being a skilled warrior. He had been in the solar since before the sun had even rose above the horizon. It was nearing midday, and his stomach began rumbling. He stood and walked around the desk, walking over to a small hanger by the door. Grabbing his dark overcloak, he threw it over himself. It made his shoulders look broader, and his image, fiercer. He opened the door and began walking to the working chambers of Veon Poole, the steward of Winterfell. Kyne and Will, the two guards posted to the solar, began following him. He turned to them. Nay, stay at your posts. Guard the solar. I am in my home. After the guards nodded, he continued on his path. Reaching the chambers of the steward, he knocked once on the door before entering. Sitting at a desk was Veon Poole, writing up some sort of order. Seeing his acting liege lord enter his chambers, he stood and bowed. My lord. Is everything all right? You know you can send for me. I worry not Veon. I wished to leave anyways. Of course, what can I do for you? Worry not, only a handful of things. First and foremost, do any of the servants know their letters? Some do, most do not. The ones I know from atop my head are Vyra, Ynes, and Bull. Any others, I'd have to investigate. Once you find all of them, please send them to Maester Lewin. He needs assistance with copying a letter and needs as many hands as he can get on. Very good, I'll see it done, me lord. Your father did the very same thing many times to assist Lewin, if I may. Yes. If you'd be open to it, it certainly wouldn't hurt to send a raven to the citadel, requesting an assistant maester or even some acolyte assistants. After all, Winterfell is a great castle, and Lewin cannot do everything. Rob rubbed his chin in thought. Yes, yes, that is a good idea. Thank you Veon, I'll write to them on the morrow. As for the other matter, me lord. Ah yes, Please send word to the kitchen to prepare a meal for me and my wife. Send a wet nurse to watch over Samson. I wish to eat with my lady wife alone. Of course, I'll send word immediately. Nodding, Rob turned and left. He was on his way to the balcony overlooking the tiltyard, much like father always did, to watch Arya train with Edwyle and some of the men. He was at peace for a moment before he heard footfalls behind him. Turning, he saw Sir Roderick approach him. Sir Roderick, everything is well. Aye, my lord. However, riders have been seen to the north, bearing the banners of the Lion of House Lannister. That was odd. House Lannister. Who in the god's name is to the north of us? If you remember, the second son of Lord Tywine had travelled north to visit the Wall. It is most likely him. Oh yes, I do remember now. Well, it would be remiss of me not to offer him a light feast and a warm bed. Motioning to Sir Roderick to remain where he was, he turned and called down to his brother. Edwyle nodded and sheathed his blade. He ran up the stairs to join him. Rob, what is it? Riders have been seen to the north, we believe it to be the party of Lord Tyrion Lannister. Make yourself presentable and lead a party north to escort him back to Winterfell, he'll dine with us tonight. Nodding, Edwyle left to wash the sweat off him and cloth himself more appropriately. Rob turned back to Sir Roderick. You heard me, prepare a small party of men to join my brother. Also send word to Veon to cancel my lunch plans and to order the kitchens to prepare a small welcoming feast. Bowing, Sir Roderick left. Edwyle. Instead of taking a full bath, he elected to simply dampen a piece of cloth and wipe down all the seat on him. Putting on simply, yet fine leathers, he put on a black wolf's overcloak, similar to his brother Rob's dark brown one. Grabbing his blade, he buckled the scabbard around his waist and tied his small sheath for his dagger to the opposite side of his waist. Leaving his chambers, he made his way over to the stables. Passing the dim-witted, but kind-hearted Hodder, he saw that his men were already prepared for him. Mounting his horse, he guided it over the main courtyard. Joining him was a small party of 5 guardsmen. A standard-bearer to hold the arms of House Stark, along with 4 other riders. One of whom was the new captain of the Winterfell Guard, Horlis of House Mollin. Gently tugging the reins, Edwyle moved his horse to the gate, the guardsman opened it and lowered the drawbridge before opening the outer gate as well. Turning, he met the eyes of Horlis and the other men. Without speaking, he looked forward once more and snapped the reins, sending his mount forward, galloping at a strong pace. The party moved through Wintertown first. In all honesty, it was a little saddening. Besides, in winter, most of the town was empty. He always thought that the north should have a city rivaling those of the south. Regardless, they quickly moved through the urban, muddy streets of Wintertown and emerged onto the King's Road. He expertly flanked his horse to the right so as to circle the castle and ride northbound. Though he could have left through the north gate, he elected to inspect the walls of Winterfell during his journey. The walls were of grey granite, standing strong. In reality, attempting to take the castle, while it was fully manned, that is, was nigh on impossible. If, by the gods, the outer wall was taken, an enemy still had to either cross a drawbridge or one of the very flimsy gangplanks that connected the walls, planks that were specifically designed to collapse whenever an alarm sounded. In addition, the outer walls, though tall and mighty, was still shorter than the inner wall. It also possessed no crenellations along the inner side of the outer wall. This meant that should the outer wall fall, the enemies had no protection from arrow fire from within the castle. He remembered his lessons well. He knew that the Winterfell honor guard numbered about 1,000 of various types of troops. That being said, the castle could still mount a respectable defense with only 300 to 400 guardsmen. He was just glad that House Stark could call upon 10,000 troops if needed without the need from their vassals. Most Southerners thought Northerners to be barbarians. This was very wrong. Especially in respect to House Stark. After all, as he had to remind his brother Rob, House Stark did not ascend to be the kings of winter through niceties and weakness. After the Starks conquered the entirety of the north, his ancestors worked on raising their own power base. It was through diplomacy that allowed them to initially call upon their vassals and gain new vassals from conquests. But they did not wish to continue to rely on such houses. His ancestors worked to create new minor houses that dotted about a 20-league radius around Winterfell. Over the centuries, these petty lords and houses, sworn directly to House Stark, grew to the point that in any rebellion, House Stark did not immediately need to call their banners. This was unique, yes. Though those petty lords sworn to House Stark are technically independent lords as are all the other vassals, they are not permitted to bear their own coat of arms nor possess their own words. All their troops and guardsmen were outfitted in Stark livery and all young boys were taught about House Stark, not their own house. In reality, they served more as custodians than lords in the traditional sense. A southerner may assume that this may cause friction between Winterfell and these petty lords, yet to keep it fair, the taxes on these petty lords are nearly nothing, and many of their men are accepted at Winterfell to be guards or servants. This has allowed a brotherhood to be formed for centuries between the Starks and their direct host. A very good system if I say so myself. In his own head, he realized his party was nearly to the Lannisters' party, which had stopped as is customary. As they drew nearer, Edwyle was able to spot the dwarf at the lead, a special strap on his saddle allowing him to ride. Flanking him were 3 Lannister guardsmen in red. 2 as escorts, and another as his standard bearer. He slowed his horse until they stopped about 30 paces from one another. He initiated the welcoming. Hail! I am Edwyle of the House Stark. I am Tyrion of the House Lannister. I have been sent to escort you to Winterfell, where a hot meal and soft beds await. Ha! The dwarf turned to one of his guards and muttered something. I see the honor did not depart Winterfell along with its lord. I assume Lord Stark left south already. Aye, that's the truth. My brother, Robb, hold Winterfell and the north in our father's name. Come, follow us back to the keep. Notes. ****I used the website historicalstatistics.org to find the value of West AOC currency. ****I am aware that House Martindale uses quite a number of other titles. However, they sign these themselves. However, I, safely, hopefully, assumed that when House Stark communicates to them, they only refer to their northern titles as all the other titles refer to those honors that the house held when they were still in the Reach. As such, besides the inherent title of Lord of White Harbor, the only other northern title they have is Warden of the White Knife. Chapter 15, If the Shoe, or Hilt, Fits. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. 298 AC. Edwyle Stark. Tyrion Lannister was a sarcastic, witty, and informed man. Oh, he had naturally been offended at the implied jab at his house's honor, but he knew Lord Tyrion's comment was meant more as a jab about his lord father. After all, Eddard Stark's honor was known throughout the realm. Regardless, the imp's presence was a nice change of attitude. Though he did not blame him of course, due to his father's absence, Robb barely had enough time to ever join him for sparring, hunting, or to simply enjoy each other's company. Perhaps stereotypical to House Stark, besides the antics of young Arya, Winterfell was very much devoid of loud japes and other amusing aspects of life. This was not to say that it was devoid of happiness. Robb was quick with smiles and the family shared stories every evening meal, but it was not like the courts of summer of the south. Perhaps it was simply their northern disposition, but the quick-thinking Lord Tyrion kept him on his feet. At the half-man's request, instead of immediately riding for Winterfell, their small party rode to inspect one or two of the small holdfasts that surrounded Winterfell. The 2 closest that could be visited were those belonging to House Mollin and House Tanning. Edwyle should have showed the Lannister the holdfasts of House Castle and House Poole, but they were on the other side of Winterfell. Lord Edwyle, I recognize the name of House Mollin. Is a Mollin not among us at this very moment? I was under the impression that they called Winterfell their seat. Ed let out a single, not unkind laugh before responding. And you would not be the first southerner to question this. Listen. Edwyle wheeled his horse around to ride right next to the small lord. Many families hold small holdfasts all over Winterfell's lands. House Castle, for example, originally called Winterfell Home, granted a small manse within the walls by my house. However, after centuries, many of these families, Poole, Castle, Mollin, Tanning, and others, were granted small estates around Winterfell. I see. Lord Tyrion's wish to learn was very impressionable and admirable in Edwyle's eyes. In that case, does this mean that Sir Roderick Castle is also the Lord of House Castle? In a way, yes. Though in reality more so in a way of the main branch. Like most of these houses, those that hold the families hold fast are more cousins than close family. Sir Roderick is the head of House Castle of Winterfell, while a separate lord is the head of the cadet branch of House Castle. Lord Tyrion scrunched his face as if trying to sort out all the information. In that case, Lord Edwyle, that would mean that, as many of the senior workers of Winterfell belong to these minor houses, that most are not lords of the entire house, but just the main branch. Aye, that's a good way to think of it. Does this cause problems when calling the banners? Nay. Though it is true that those lords of the cadet branches are in fact independent, they all usually answer directly to the main line. For example, though the master of House Castle of Westwalls may decide their own fate, often, they write to Sir Roderick as the master of House Castle of Winterfell for direction. Sounds easy to follow. Tyrion sarcastically responded. Instead of taking offense, Edwyle simply chuckled at the response. I can imagine it to be complex to outsiders, but to us northerners, it as natural as snowfall. Can these lords truly be called lords, if they take their direction from the lord of another house? How is that different than any other house, me lord? Does House Lannister not take orders from House Baratheon of King's Landing? But to answer, if it is easier, consider these lords acting more as keepers or custodians. Ha! If my father heard you say that, the look he'd give you would wither even your icy demeanor. The small lord laughed, though it sounded more at his own father than him. But enough of this. Even if their guests wished to inspect the surrounding lands, it was inappropriate to keep the host lord waiting more than necessary. Come, my lord. We ride for Winterfell. They took a slow gallop. He would have preferred a harder pace, but with Lord Tyrion's stature, anything faster than a slow gallop was nearly impossible for him to accomplish. He decided to send the captain ahead to prepare Winterfell for the eventual arrival. Horlis. Ride hard for Winterfell. Prepare for our arrival and inform my brother of our date. Aye, me lord. The man responded before snapping his reins and taking off faster than a bolt of lightning. Robb Stark. Horlis Mollin had just recently returned to Winterfell. His brother's notable absence caused some worry. Had they been set on by bandits? Wildings? But it was nothing so drastic. Apparently the little Lion Lord had wished to inspect the surrounding lands of Winterfell. Perhaps he was being too paranoid, but he couldn't help but suspect that he was doing so as to determine the strength of House Stark. His only hope against this was the perceived differences between Tyrion and Lord Tywine, a conflict that is known even to the Wall itself. Surely the little lion would not do all this for the father he hated. Regardless, he expected the worst. Robb just hoped that Edwyle was smart enough to see the possibility and only showed weak holdfasts as to confuse the numbers for Tyrion. Probably, Edwyle is far more intelligent than I shall ever be. Now, he found himself standing inside the inner courtyard of Winterfell. Daisy was to the right of him with young Samzin in her arms. After Daisy was Arya and Bran. Rickon was currently in the care of Maester Lewyn. In front of him, rode in 2 Stark guardsmen followed by his brother and Lord Tyrion. After them, were the little Lion's Lannister guards. They reined in their mounts and dismounted from the horses. Walking forward on his 2 stumped legs, Tyrion Lannister bowed very slightly from the neck. Lord Tyrion, be welcome to Winterfell. Please, partake in bread and salt. Before his father's departure, he impressed onto him the importance of guest rights. A servant stepped forward and offered bread and salt to Lord Tyrion and his guards. Taking the half a loaf of bread, Tyrion tore off some pieces and handed it to his guards before taking a piece for himself. Dipping the soft insides of the bread into the salt, he ate from the bread and his guards followed. The troops of House Lannister were very disciplined, but even Robb noticed how the guards visibly relaxed after the affair. Guest rights were taken very seriously in the north. Many thanks, Lord Robb. If it pleases, my men and I have ridden for many days. Would it be so far as to request a warm room to relax in? Of course, my lord. He responded very gruffly. After all, he was not Robb Stark at the moment, he was Lord Robb of the House Stark, acting Lord of Winterfell. He made sure to maintain a cold demeanor. Something that did not escape the notice of the little lion. Truly, is Winterfell so devoid of joy in the absence of Lady Stark? The imp asked humorously. Robb decided to ignore that particular jape. Hoarfrost here will show you to your chambers. A feast has been prepared for this evening. When it is time, I shall send an escort for you. Hoarfrost was the bastard son of Lord Condon and the base-born brother of Sir Kyle Condon. Robb appointed Hoarfrost as the assistant steward and butler of Winterfell. Lord Tyrion noticed his words being ignored and raised his eyebrows slightly before nodding and following the waiting Hoarfrost. Before the feast was to be held, he decided to return to his father's solar and finish up some last pieces of letters before he would call it an end to his day. Returning to the solar, he was surprised when waiting for him in front of the door was Maester Luwin. Luwin. What can I help you with? Reaching into his robes, Luwin gave him a sealed scroll. It was sealed in a deep yellow wax with the crossed long axes of House Dustin imprinted into the wax. A scroll from House Dustin. It appears so, Robb. What would Lady Barbary need now? He sighed exasperatedly. Robb was not ignorant of the feud between his father and Lady Dustin. He had heard the reason why, but sometimes it got in the way of true progress. Join me for a moment, Luwin, I mayhap require your insight. They entered the solar and he sat behind the desk. Lord Robb Stark. Acting Lord of Winterfell. My lord, I write to you to humbly request that Orphan Dustin be sent to Winterfell to foster. To learn of how to be a true Northman from the great House Stark. Lady Barbary Dustin. Rightful Lady of House Dustin and Barrowton. He handed the letter to Luwin as he sat back and tried to think back. Why did that name sound so familiar? Who in the God's name is Orphan Dustin? Luwin had finished reading the very blunt letter. If I remember correctly, I believe him to be the distant cousin of the late Lord Willam Dustin. I believe your Lord Father confirmed him as the heir to Barrowton prior to your wedding to Lady Dacey. Of course. I remember now. From what he remembered nearly a year ago, Orphan Dustin was a young man, close to Bran or Arya's age. But where did this come from? Why would Lady Barbary act on this now? I know that she has always felt threatened by any potential heirs. Luwin leaned side to side on his chair before answering. Perhaps her father has grown tired of the feud between his liege lord and his daughter. Maybe he forced her begin rebuilding the bridges between your two houses. Robb was deep in thought. Perhaps, but she might be testing the waters. After all, I have expected some of the lords to be pushy, to test my resolve in the absence of my father. There is always the possibility. But besides House Bolton and House Dustin, House Ryswell is currently a pariah within the north. Unusual for House Ryswell has traditionally held close ties with Winterfell. I suspect that the continued feud has slowed trade and growth for the Rills. Lord Ryswell is a hard man, but also pragmatic. If the source of his house's troubles lay with his daughter, he'd no doubt see to it that it is resolved. You make a good point. Yet I am still not fully convinced. Luwin remained silent. Summon Edwyle for me, will you? At once, me lord. Esteemed conclave of the Citadel. My most learned men, I write to you to request additional manpower in the north. Winterfell is a large castle. Maester Luwin leaves nothing to be desired, a great maester with no equal. But he is stretched too thin. It is because of this that I ask that you send acolytes or an assistant maester to Winterfell to relieve Luwin of some of his burdens. Lord Robb Stark. Acting Lord of Winterfell and Acting Lord Paramount and Warden of the North. Robb had just finished compiling his letter to the Citadel when his brother and Luwin entered. Without saying a word, he motioned to the two chairs in front of the desk. They sat silently as he reread his letter once more before putting it down on the desk. Ed, thank you for coming. I must ask your advice on a sensitive matter. Of course, Robb, what is it? It appears that Lady Barbary Dustin has requested that her heir, one Orphan Dustin, be fostered here in Winterfell. He handed the letter over to Edwyle to let him read it. Luwin has proposed that perhaps it is Lord Ryswell's words in Lady Barbary's hand. Luwin makes a good point. If I remember my lessons with Veon correctly, House Ryswell has begun to suffer recently in terms of trade and northern loyalty. I wouldn't put it past Lord Roderick to have reached the end of his rope with his daughter. I can't deny that possibility, but I can deny it no more than the possibility that Lady Barbary seeks to force her heir away. He is a threat to her after all. Perhaps, but if she was to do that, it would be smarter for her to send him to another house, Bolton or Marndale, anywhere but Winterfell. You are correct, In the short term it would solve Lady Dustin's problem. But being fostered in Winterfell inherently strengthens the bonds between the two houses. In the long term, House Dustin would become some of our closest supporters. Very well. If both of you two concur, I will write back to Lady Barbary and accept her proposal. Perhaps Arya and Bran can make new friends with the young lord. Robb relented. He still suspected an ulterior motive, but with no proof and the disagreements of two of his close advisers, he was forced to back down. He excused Edwyle and handed Lewyn the letter for Old Town before he too left the Solar. As the two left, Hoarfrost knocked and entered the chambers. "My lord, the feast has been prepared. Shall I fetch for our guests?" "Yes, please do so." "Have my brother Edwyle send for my family?" "Yes, me lord." Tyrion Lannister. He had finally found his comfort, reading a tome he had requested from the great library of Winterfell, when a servant had fetched him for the feast. As he entered the great hall, it was a small affair. Instead of sitting at the high table, it appeared that the young Robb Stark had elected to sit at a low table, where his family could sit on one side, and he and his guards on the other. It was a simple supper. Sitting with Robb Stark was his impressive younger brother, Edwyle. He had yet to reach conclusions about many in the family, but he thought he liked Edwyle. In many ways, he saw his own dream self in the young Wolf Lord. He was a fierce warrior, but he was much prouder of his scholarly work. His stature had forced him to use his mind as his weapon, but he'd like to think that had he been born with the legs of a man, he would still utilize his mind like the young Edwyle. His older brother on the other hand was a different case. Robb Stark favored his mother's looks more than his father. But the way he acted and carried himself was all exactly like the Honorable Eddard Stark. He was very much obviously trying to follow in his father's steps. He was good at it, very good. But his own father was Tywin Lannister. He knew when men were trying to be something they were not. They enjoyed the evening, and he shared many stories with the younger Starks, all laughed. He found himself slightly jealous. If only my family was this close. It brought him joy that he was able to ingratiate himself with the wolf pups of House Stark. He must have been distracted as he had not heard one of the doors open into the chamber. Then, he saw it. In walked Sir Rodrik, the Master-at-Arms for Winterfell. He leaned down to whisper some matter into the ear of Robb Stark. But he wasn't focused on what was said. No, his eyes were on Sir Rodrik's waist. He must have made a face because the table grew quiet. He looked up. "Apologies, what did you say?" Robb Stark looked at him oddly. "I said, are you all right? You seem to have focused on something." He pointed at the dagger attached to the knight's waist. "There, that blade. Where did you get it?" The entire Stark household looked at him suspiciously. Edwyle visibly laid his hand on his sword's pommel. Robb Stark motioned for the dagger. Sir Rodrik gave it to him. This is the blade that was used by an assassin in an attempt to take the life of my brother." Gone were the smiles around the table. He saw Sir Rodrik motion and he heard the movements of some guards behind him. His own tensed. Robb Stark looked right into his eyes. "How do you know of this blade?" Tyrion, having grown up with the withering looks from his father, looked right back into Robb Stark's eyes. "Oh, I know that blade very well. That blade belongs to the Master of Coin, Petyr Baelish." Notes. Asterisk, and that wraps up that chapter. What kinds of games is Barbary Dustin playing? And the dagger? Oh, we'll see that the game of the throne will rapidly increase in pace. After all, the Northmen are not known for patience and beating around the bush. Asterisk, I am aware that House Condon, at least Sir Kyle Condon, is sworn to House Sewin. That being said, as Castle Sewin is only half a day's ride from Winterfell, one can safely assume that the seat of House Condon is fairly close to Winterfell as well. Chapter 16, First Impressions are Everything. Notes. Asterisk warning, there is a very brief, non-pictured, mention of Sam near the end of this chapter. It is listed among a list of crimes. Chapter text. 298 AC. Robb Stark. The entire table was silent. He could hear the breathing of Edwyle next to him. Sir Rodrik was as stern as a statue. In his peripheral, he noticed some of the guards slowly approach the table. The two Lannister men were tense and began looking around. Guest rights was integral to the North. But it was not all-encompassing. Should a party have information about an attempt on a host family member, they are compelled to share it. But Lord Tyrion kept his eyes matched with his. I need to control this. Maester Lewyn. Lewyn walked forth. Me lord. Please take Arya, Brandon, and Rickon to their chambers. Bran and Rickon both seemed okay with it, but he heard a shift that he knew little Arya was about to argue. Thankfully, Edwyle leaned behind him. He was thankful, as he did not want to break the staring match with the Lannister lord yet. He didn't know what he did, but Arya agreed very quickly and left with her brothers. The hall was quiet as the young pups were escorted from the room. Once they left, he resumed speaking. Lord Tyrion. Tell me everything. Now. He was surprised at the hardness of his voice. Apparently Tyrion thought the same at his widened eyes. Before immediately answering, the little lion reached for a chalice to quench his thirst. He drank the entire cup in one gulp. Putting the cup back on the table, Tyrion looked around the table. If I were him, I'd be very careful in the way I'd proceed. Starting slowly, the imp's voice grew in strength. Before traveling to Winterfell, His Grace held a tourney celebration for my nephew's name-a-day. At the tourney, Lord Baelish had this blade. I placed a bet against him that Sir Loras Tyrell would defeat Sir Robar Royce in the joust. He poured himself more wine before he continued. Sir Loras won, so I was given the dagger. But then, I placed my next wager on my brother, Sir Jaime, that he'd defeat Sir Loras. I never wager against family. Robb made sure to listen not only to his voice, but his tone, his movements. He knew of the reputation that Northerners held. That we were too honorable for our own good, that our ability at the supposed great game was weak. But the North bred hard men. Perhaps he was not educated on the ins and outs of court intrigue, but he had become quite good at reading a person's civasse face. Unfortunately for my pockets, my brother was unhorsed by Sir Loras. It is a fine blade, but I had lost and returned it back to Lord Baelish, all too smug for my liking. He spoke for the first time since the imp began his story. And that was the last time you saw it. Oh, not at all. Until I joined His Grace's party north, I always saw it either on Lord Baelish's person or in his private solar in the Red Keep. He stood and motioned for the guards to relax and assume their positions. Sir Roderick walked back until he was standing respectfully against the rear wall. He leaned over and placed his hands on the table. And why should I trust you? Home. To me, the corrupt members of the King's Court are no better than the Robb. He turned and saw Edwyle widen his eyes in warning. Of course. How could I be so stupid? He did not like Tywin Lannister from what he heard, but to openly insult his family in the presence of his son was too far. It seemed that it was not lost on the imp, who simply cracked a grin. My query still stands, my Lord of Lions. Why should I trust you? Lord Tyrion did not answer immediately. Instead, he leaned forward and actually turned to his brother Edwyle. Lord Edwyle, you have spent more time with me than your brother. I ask for your honest opinion. Do I seem like a simpleton? Have you made the same assumption that many in the South have, that my stature must mean that my intelligence is of equal smallness? His brother, always the stoic, simply sat quietly, thinking. No, no, you are not a simpleton. As I once said to my sweet sister, Jaime has his sword, and me, my mind. And a mind needs practice just as a sword needs a whetstone. Now, the imp turned to look directly at him. I not believe myself to be the smartest man in the realm, but I would like to think that I have my wits around me. He sipped from his cup. Which begs the question, what sort of imbecile arms an assassin with his own blade? It was a good point. A very good point. But he still saw through the argument. Yet, that would make Lord Baelish an imbecile too. Would it not? He kept his voice low and cold. How very convenient for him. Robb decided to turn the conversation another way, abruptly. Tell me of Petyr Baelish. The imp too was mildly annoyed at such a turn of events, but played it off well. Very well. Tell me of him. A short man he is. If not for me, he'd be the smallest man in the capital. He sports a beard, smart and trimmed to only his chin and mouth. I don't care what he looks like, tell me of him, of his ways, of his character. Oh, he's a charmer for sure. He is also a peddler of flesh in the many whorehouses of King's Landing. He was brought from the Vale by Lord Arryn. Though his Grace's reign has been a downward spiral of debt, Lord Baelish seemingly never has a difficulty finding more coin. Do you suspect foul play? He recognized this was dangerous ground to walk on. Accusing a member of the small council of crimes without proof was tantamount to treason against the Iron Throne. It impressed him when Tyrion made sure he knew of this too but continued regardless. Unsure. I certainly wouldn't trust him with anything more than serving as a butler. How he made it to the small council still surprises me. But, do you suspect foul play? Robb made sure to enunciate every word. I certainly wouldn't past him. I can say nothing more than that. He gave the Lion Lord a hard look. But after some tense moments, he nodded. Hoarfrost. Me lord. Our guests have had a weary journey. See them to their chambers. The Lannister guards and Little Lion slowly stood from the table. As they were escorted out of the hall, he called their attention. Yes, Lord Robb. Sir Roderick brought me news of a captured bandit leader. On the morrow, I shall ride out and deliver northern justice. I invite you to join me. After all, if you want to learn all about the North, you should see how we deal with those who cause us harm. Lord Tyrion was a man practiced in the arts of politics, but Robb was now the Lord of Winterfell for the moment, and his cold tone made even the Little Lion nod quickly, hopeful not to displease his host. He waited until the last of the Lannister party was escorted out of the room when he turned to Sir Roderick and his brother. Solar. Now. He left no room for discussion. Do you believe him? Robb, Edwyle, and the Master-at-Arms were in the Lord's Solar. Robb was behind the desk facing his brother. I am inclined to. Tyrion Lannister is many things, but dull and witless is not one of them. Is he truthful about Lord Baelish? Perhaps, perhaps not. Is he truthful of his lack of knowledge about Bran's attempt? I believe that he did not have anything to do with it. Robb was still suspect, but Edwyle cared for House Stark just as he did. If he truly thought the dwarf was at fault, he certainly wouldn't be as calm now. Robb. He gave Edwyle his attention. You should send word to father. He has yet to arrive at the capital. If this Lord Baelish is truly as suspect as he is, we should send word now before he can sink his claws into father. He nodded and wrote a small letter to be delivered. Father. Tyrion Lannister was hosted on his return journey from the wall. He claimed that the dagger used by the assassin on Bran belongs to Petyr Baelish, the master of coin. You know both Edwyle's judgment and mine. We believe him. Do not trust Baelish. Winter is coming, the lone wolf dies, but the pack survives. Your son. Robb. He folded the letter and sealed it with his signet ring. He walked over to Sir Roderick with the letter. Sir Roderick. Me lord. He looked surprised. Edwyle does not need to tell me this. This is far too dangerous to leave to chance to Raven. I shall write to Lord Mandaeally to prepare a ship for you. He handed the knight the letter. See to it that this is given to my father's hands only. If you are beset on by foes, or cannot give it to him for any reason, burn it. Destroy it. Ensure that only his eyes see this. The knight had a mix of both genuine surprise and pride at the change of his lord's eldest son. He smiled. I shall see it done. Good. Leave now, tonight. Prepare a party of men of any amount you require. I'll have the Raven fly tonight. The knight bowed and left the room, leaving him and Edwyle. And you, thank you for your insight, brother. Of course. But Sir Roderick's departure leaves yet another position open in the household. Robb was growing annoyed at all the temporary positions. Since father and Sir Jory left, you have been Sir Roderick's assistant. Until his return, consider yourself the acting master-at-arms of Winterfell. Edwyle looked at him shocked. He got himself together quickly thought. First order, me lord. He asked smugly. He grinned in return. Assist Sir Roderick with his departure. After he leaves, have a party prepared for tomorrow's execution. I'll see it done immediately. Tyrion Lannister. When he awoke, he elected to call for a bath before he would join Robb Stark in his northern execution. Summoning a servant, he requested one and left for the hall to break his fast as it was prepared. A guard was posted outside his door and escorted him to the hall. The man, who was named Bmard he learned, was of average height. He was broad across the shoulders and was clearly muscled neath the leathers, chainmail, and bits of plate armor. He had to admit, House Stark knew how to choose their troops. Entering the hall, he saw that Edwyle Stark was already at the high table. To his left was the younger Stark sister, Arya. The second son saw him and enter and called him over. "Thank you, my lord." He took a seat next to the young pup before turning to a servant. After giving his order, he once again turned to share conversation with the two Starks. Edwyle was his usual calm and quiet person, but Arya was a little ball of energy. "What was the wall like? Why do they call you the Imp? Is it true that Casterly Rock is taller than the wall? What's King's Landing like?" Though he remained silent, it was clear that Edwyle Stark was quite amused at his sister's antics and the corner of his mouth began to curl upwards. Before he could answer himself, a plate of his morning meal was placed for him. It was a hearty meal. He was given both a slice of black sausage as well as some bacon, fried crisp. It was accompanied by 2 eggs, fried till runny. He was given 4 slices of thick bread, with what appeared to be a side of butter and snowberry jam. His eyes must have gone wide as Edwyle chuckled and turned to him. "Tea's quite the meal, my lord." "Yes, very much so. I think mayhap I will not finish all of it." Edwyle Stark simply shrugged his shoulders. "Regardless, I'd advise that you eat all you can. As I'm sure you've noticed by now, this is not the land of summer. A man needs his energy. In the north, even in the summer, we can still experience snowfalls." Electing to follow the advice of a member of House Stark, he nodded and began to dig in greedily, not realizing his hunger. After taking a bite of bacon, he turned to Arya Stark. "My lady, to answer some of your questions, the wall was magnificent. I've never seen anything like it. A wall of pure ice." He knew from dealing with Tommen and Myrcella that the best policy with children was to always be enthusiastic. "Though I was unable to tell, it is true from what I have heard from the Maesters that Casterly Rock is in fact taller than the wall, though less magnificent from the outside." He wet his mouth with a sip of Waterdale. "As for King's Landing, it is grand. Oh, it has its distastes for sure, but nowhere else in the Seven Kingdom will you find such a concentration of people. Traders from all over the known world can be found there." But still little Arya seemed to be unimpressed. "And why do they call you the Imp?" She saw me skip over that one. "It is because I am smaller than I should be according to my father." Arya smiled, grateful all her questions were answered before returning to her own meal. He followed her example. He finished both the bacon and the black sausage as well as the 2 eggs. He could not find it within himself to finish all the bread and only consumed 2. Leaving the table, he returned with Bmard to his chambers where a steaming bath was waiting for him. Washing himself, he allowed the stress to leave his body for the time being. The past day had been far more stressful than he thought. He allowed the steamy water to relax his muscles. He had made the mistake of assuming that the new generation of Starks followed in their father's steps in regard to the knowledge of the great game. He was quickly dissuaded from that belief. Neither Robb nor Edwyle Stark were masters of the game. He'd admit that they played it far better than he initially assumed. The previous evening, by bringing up Lord Baelish's possible crimes, the young wolf had been testing him. Would he report them to the king? Would he play along? Though unrefined, Tyrion was genuinely astonished that they possessed the skill at all. A knock sounded at the door. "Enter." Tyrion was thankful there was a partition between the door and the tub. The butler of Winterfell, a fellow named Hoarfrost, entered, his name recognizable. "My lord, Lord Stark has sent word that they are nearly prepared to be off." "I will not keep him waiting, inform him I shall prepare myself quickly." The servant left as he climbed out of the tub. His feet and body immediately shocked at the sudden cold temperatures. Walking hurriedly to his bed, he put on his stockings, his trousers, his doublet and finally his overcoat. Had he been a normal man, he would have strapped a blade at his waist, but he was not most men. Leaving the room, Bmard was once again awaiting him. "Please take me to your lord." "I am ready." Silently nodding, the guard turned and escorted him to the inner courtyard where his mount had been nicely prepared. As he walked out of the keep, he saw a dozen Stark guardsmen already mounted. Robb and Edwyl were still checking the final straps on their own horses. Robb's horse was a beautiful, pale destrier. But it was his brother's mount that attracted his attention more. Edwyl apparently preferred to ride a deep brown courser. Strapped to the mount's side was the largest sword he had ever seen in his life. It has to be, there is no other possibility. It had to the legendary blade ice. Lord Stark must have left it with his son when he traveled south. As he approached, both brothers heard his footfalls and turned to him. Robb maintained the cold face of a northern lord while Edwyl offered an incredibly small smile. "Lord Tyrion. We best be off now. The guards have held the prisoner overnight in a small village, no more than 3 or 4 homes. At a gentle gallop, we can make it there within the hour." Turning, the eldest Stark mounted his horse and began directing away, checking in with his guards. Tyrion saw his own 2 guards among them as well. Edwyl moved to help him up on his horse, but he quickly waved him off. 'Twas true, he could not do all the things most could, but over the years he had been able to find ways to things himself. As soon as he mounted, Edwyl followed too. Robb Stark watched as the last riders mounted before turning. He could hear the lord snap his reins, for he quickly disappeared through the gate. He soon found himself snapping his reins, Edwyl Stark and his own 2 guards taking up the rear. On one hand, he knew the invitation to go along with them was partly a veiled threat, he was also genuinely excited and curious. Edwyl Stark. He had been pleasantly surprised at the little Lion Lord. He admired him for his conviction to accomplish many tasks himself. It certainly left a mark on some of the northerners that he had met. Actions spoke louder than words. This was proven once again, as not once during the long ride did he hear the little lord complain. If he had any discomfort, he kept it to himself. They had been riding for nearly an hour. He knew of the village that they were going to. He had once accompanied his father to assist with a dispute that had grown out of proportions. The party flanked around a becrag in the land and then he saw it. It was a humble village. Only 4 homes, along with 2 barns and meeting house. Despite its small size, it wasn't at all overly impoverished or in a poor state. All the villagers had their own profession and they proved to be a profitable village. Their party rode into the village, the occupants bowing as they rode by. They noticed the flapping of a direwolf banner by one of the barns. As they turned a corner, they saw the 3 guardsmen standing in front of it. He could hear Greywind growl at the flapping banner, but Phantom was as quiet as he usually was. Stopping in front of the small corral that was before the barn, their party dismounted. Edwyl watched as one of the guards approached his brother to speak to him. In the meantime, he turned to check on Lord Tyrion. He caught the imp groan a little as he dismounted, but he made no other complaint. Focusing on his own responsibilities, Edwyl untied the leather straps that held ice to his horse. He carried it over to the front of the party with the Lannisters behind him. By now, the guard had left his brother and was walking back to the barn, shouting to open and fetch the prisoner. The guards that rode with him began to set up a small perimeter to keep out any potential threats. He stood next to his brother and waited. In that moment, he realized something. Robb had never carried out an execution before. He should have when he and him were ambushed years ago, but he had allowed that honor to be his. But looking at Robb now, had he any reservations, he kept them to himself. The barn doors quickly opened, and 2 guards were dragging a man in chains out. The man was ragged. He wore thick leathers and had a sword belt strapped around him, the blade having been confiscated long ago. The man had a narrow face, its creases dirty and oily. The guards stopped just before the waiting block of stone in the corral. To his left was Robb and to his right, flanking him, was standing Tyrion Lannister, creating a rudimentary L formation. There was a moment of silence as Robb bowed his head before once again raising it. He looked at bandit leader. "What gives you the right to kill me, EI? What give you the right?" The man was angry and struggling against the chains. In a cold voice, Robb responded. What gives you the right to kill my people? To kidnap and rape their sisters and daughters? As the man continued to struggle, at Rob's nodding, the guards pushed him forward and forced his waist down so his shoulders were in line with the stone. Ceremoniously, he took a few steps away from Rob before kneeling on one knee. With outstretched hands, he offered the hilt of ice to Rob. Grabbing it with both hands, in one fast motion, Rob pulled ice from the scabbard and held it high. The stinging sound as it left the scabbard silenced the last mutterings of noise from the observing guards and villagers. The blade was smoky with ripples all along the steel. True Valyrian steel was something else to beholden. Swinging the blade down so the tip was resting in the dirt and Rob supported it from his hands on the pommel and hilt, he bowed his neck. In the name of Robert, of the House Baratheon, the first of his name, King of the Andals, the Rhoynar, and the first men. I, Rob of the House Stark, do sentence you to die. Should you have final words, speak them now, or may you forever keep them. Should have been more careful with the last one. The bandit muttered. Edwyle couldn't resist sneering from that, but Rob held firm. Nodding, Rob put his right foot back and swung the sword above his head. Holding it high for only half a moment, Rob swiftly brought it back down. The mumbling of the bandit cut off, and the body quit struggling. As Edwyle bent down to hand the head to a guard, he ordered a single guard to prepare for them to return to Winterfell. Turning back around, he saw Rob still remain still. Though now, Rob was not looking at the body of the bandit. He was looking right into the eyes of Tyrion Lannister. Chapter 17, The Gilded Wolves. Notes. I have elected to do a side story about the history and power of House Stark. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter text. 298 AC. Daisy Stark née Mormont. She did not realize truly how much she enjoyed being a mother. She had always seen herself as a warrior woman of Bear Island, but alas, it was not to be. Daisy still remembered her awkward wedding night. She and Rob had been able to establish a solid friendship. But she admitted, after her sweet Samzin was born, her feelings for Rob grew. Oh, she'd never tell him that. Wouldn't want him to stop trying. She smiled to herself. Baby Samzin was much like his father in many ways. Unlike her as a babe, according to her own mother, Samzin was quiet. She supposed he took that from his father and grandfather. The puff of hair upon his head was a dark brown, but she noticed in the sun, it turned very, very light reddish blonde. It was truly too indistinguishable for most people to see. Her son possessed a deep eye coloring. Not a bright blue like his father, but a deeper blue, like the color of a roaring sea in a storm. Samzin's hair was not wavy like his father's, but straight like hers. Truthfully, she had been worried at first. She knew she would love Samzin until her final days came. But Samzin took many of her traits. Seemingly the only thing that reminded her of Rob in him was his quiet nature and eye color, something which wasn't even close to Rob's. She had grown to know Rob for the months leading up to Samzin's birth. He was not a vain man, nor an arrogant one. That being said, she couldn't help but worry when Rob saw him for the first time. Would he be upset at her? Would he be upset that the babe didn't resemble him? She knew these thoughts were hogwash but could not help thinking of them regardless. She was reinvigorated when Rob did nothing but praise her and their child. I can find life in this marriage. She had never been opposed to finding love, but she had always thought it to be natural, primal. Little did Daisy think she would find it beginning to bloom in the heir to House Stark. How did she know that he felt the same? It had been a question that she asked herself many a time. But she saw it in the actions. Initially, whenever his father and he rode out, either Lady Catelyn, Edwyle, or Sir Roderick would be appointed as the Castellan of Winterfell. But over time, it came to the point that whenever he and Edwyle rode out, she would be appointed as Castellan. This wasn't the only measure, but all the little things. She soon learned that her husband lacked courage or skill in the art of speaking about his emotions. Very well. Some were good at it, others not so much. Oh, she had seen him curious, angry, happy, tired, and so on, but he never discussed his thoughts with her. Perhaps his actions were his way of opening up to her. Perhaps it was his way of speaking. But enough of that. Rob had told her of all the news that happened the previous evening, while she was handling little Samzin. The news of the dagger's owner, of the mission he gave to Sir Roderick, of everything. But now, her husband should be on the way back from dealing out good, old-fashioned, northern justice. She had once read in a very old tome, many months ago from Winterfell's library, and within it, it told of a story. When Aegon I Targaryen had conducted his royal progresses throughout his newly conquered kingdoms, he held court in Barrowton, the seat of House Dustin. While there, Lord Dustin had been summoned to perform an execution on a deserter of the Night's Watch, at that time, very rare. Aegon had requested to come with the Lord as he did so. As they rode out, one of the maesters that came with Aegon as well as a septon of the king's party had joined in. When the party had arrived at the spot, Lord Dustin had prepared for the execution. Doing it so quickly, neither the king nor the septon had time to ask where the executioner was. What was described next was very amusing, and she would remember for a very long time her initial reaction after reading it. After the execution, the southern septon began ranting and raving about the barbarity of such an act. Of how no good lord should sully their hands in the blood of the guilty. The septon foolishly called on the king to attaint Lord Dustin for his tree-worshipping ways. Aegon did not have time to respond before Lord Dustin swung his long axe in a way that embedded itself right into the gut of the ranting septon. Apparently it caused such an incident that it took all of the political might and threats of Aegon to force the High Septon to not call for a war of religion against the North. Though it wasn't in Winterfell, the Maester wrote that many months later, the King who knelt apparently sent a raven to King's Landing dutifully reporting to the court that the Lord Dustin had died from madness, apparently throwing himself from the highest tower in Barrowton out of rage. Regardless, she would always be amused at the story. Gods, those Southerners truly are just a bunch of flowers. So weak they rely more on words to fight for them than the bite of steel. Daisy herself would refuse to be a weak lady of the castle. Since she was able to walk after Samzin, she had found herself training in the tiltyard. Much of her strength had left her, not training for many months would cause that. Although she could not block strikes that she normally would have been able to, her knowledge certainly didn't escape her. With the help of Sir Roderick, she was taught how to avoid and deflect better than she used to. Once her strength fully returned, blocking wouldn't be a problem, but there was no harm in learning some more skills. But now, she found herself where she had often been recently, walking slowly along the balcony of the inner courtyard and tiltyard of Winterfell. Softly humming while carrying Samzin. He was an easy babe. Never screaming for anything. But he was a mama's boy. The boy obviously preferred to be held by herself. He tried to hide it, but she knew that Robb was hurt by it. She explained that it was not Samzin's fault, he was but a babe. She laughed when Robb subsequently pouted just like his son. She slowly continued to the nursery. No matter how much she wished to spend with Samzin, there was work to be done. Handing over her son to a nursing maid, she set her destination for Veon Poole's office. Entering, the steward bowed. "My lady. Veon, I was informed that you had reports for me to look over." "Ah, yes. Give me a moment." This would be the first time that Daisy would look over the financial dealings of her house, Robb having done it since Lady Catelyn left. The steward proceeded to look through the parchments on his desk before he found what he was looking for. "This is the most recent report on the treasury of House Stark and Winterfell, broken down by way of income and expenditures." He handed said paper to her. Daisy had been trained on her lady duties by her mother, but admittedly, she was not very good at sums, and she was often confused by the budgeting necessary for castle upkeep. "Would you be kind and walk me through this?" "Of course, my lady, please, have a seat." Once they found their seats, Daisy flanking the steward, he put the report between them. As noted here, House Stark's treasury currently holds 329,436 gold dragons. "Pardon?" Daisy's eyes went wide with shock. House Lannister was considered the richest house in the kingdoms. According to Lewin, they were able to lend to Robert Baratheon nearly 3 million gold dragons. House Stark was not nearly close in wealth, but hundreds of thousands of gold dragons was not something to balk at. "You mean to tell me, that my family, holds over 100,000 gold dragons?" "Yes, my lady." Veon answered calmly. "I knew that House Stark was powerful, but I didn't know that much." "Oh, I never really understood the reason either until His Grace's recent visit and speaking with some of his court. House Stark has coin, and quite a bit of it. But since the days of Barthogen II Stark, House Stark has made a policy of using only what is needed. After all, you should know yourself as a northerner, winter is coming. We northerners need not spend on such trinkets as they do in the south. Where does it all come from? Daisy was still quite astounded, and she was sure to have words with Robb when he returned. House Stark could turn the north into a true powerhouse, and yet, it is considered a backwater. If it pleases my lady, let us finish with the treasury, then I'll move on to the incomes and expenditures. Very well. Along with the gold, the coffers stand at 9,003,049,802 silver stags. Though that was still an incredibly high amount, unlike the gold, she could believe that House Stark had that many silver stags. There are some other minor notes, but most of that is change in copper groats that cannot be exchanged for a larger denomination. And now where does this all come from? Most of House Stark's wealth comes from three main sources. The first is through the processing of incomes directly on Stark land. This is further broken into mostly timber, wool, and iron mines. The second source is through taxes. As you know, vassal houses pay 1/5 of all revenue per year, minor houses pay 1/7 of all revenue a year, and petty houses pay 1/12 of all revenue per year in taxes. This all goes to House Stark. Now of course, 1/3 of this is sent south to King's Landing per our taxes to the Iron Throne. And the last. Her eyes still wide, scanning the report. The last source is less understood in the traditional sense of monetary value. What do you mean? Well, my lady, House Stark is nigh on 8,000 years old, and that's only from recorded history. The Starks are old, very old. Although one may not think, it seems that no matter how mad a particular Stark king may have been thousands of years ago, they all seemed to stash a little. You mean to tell me that House Stark has saved for thousands of years? It was hard to stay calm. She was slightly angered at this knowledge. If her house had this kind of wealth, she would have used to build, to expand, to invest. Though it has changed over the eons and many records no longer survive, we know that from Torrhen to Ellard Stark, the perceived policy was to store 1/6 of all remaining wealth into vaults and coffers. It changed since then. Under Lord Eddard, he has tasked me with directing 1/5 of all wealth into the coffers, though that is mainly simply Lord Eddard's conservative financial nature. Why not more? Why not save more? Mostly due to the expenditures. While you may think House Stark to be greedy because of this number, wait until you see what the house spends. The largest four expenditures are the following: the war chest, maintenance and upkeep, the Night's Watch, and tax returns. Tax returns. It is the smallest of the main expenditures, but it does take place. Sometimes the lords of the north send too much coin. House Stark does not seek to rob their vassals, however. Once all taxes come to Winterfell, they are inspected once more, and any surplus is sent back to the point of origin. Well, I don't remember any coming back to Bear Island, she said defensively. Veon seemed to hesitate. Though I am not privy to such information, it could be because of two reasons. The first, your mother has only ever sent what she owes. Most surpluses come from lords who either have too much, or too little coin, either attempting to buy good favor, or those who couldn't bother counting it. On the other hand, sometimes I am aware that Lord Stark makes agreements with particular lords that should there be a surplus, he uses it instead for one of the biggest expenditures, upkeep and pay stubs. What does that entail? Daisy, though always proud of her skill at arms, also loved to learn of all aspects of castle life. Besides the moderate amount that is invested into a war chest to use in the event that the banners are called, as well as a set amount of a reasonable stipend to the Night's Watch, most of the outgoing wealth goes into the upkeep of the north. There is a reason most lords' only major expense is the upkeep of their own keep. For House Stark, they take the brunt of making sure everything from all their defensive fortifications to Winterfell itself, to the household guard, as well as ensuring the continued maintenance of the King's Road, which runs for hundreds of leagues through the north. I never knew that. I mean, I never thought about it, but when you say it now, it all makes sense. But I'm still curious. Yes, my lady. I still don't understand why there has not been major rebuilding operations in the north as of yet. Why do we still share the costs of rebuilding Moat Cailin? Well, a simple reason is simply saving the coin. Why pay for something alone if another will split the costs? But more seriously, it is mostly used as an emergency fund. An emergency fund? You mean like in the winter? That is definitely one of the largest losses of coin that the private coffers face, but it also includes things like funding wars should the war chest run dry. I am truly shocked that my good father's house has, without complaint, taken most of the expense of the north into their hands. Then she saw Veon give a smug grin. Well, my lady, it certainly isn't for nothing. She grew suspicious of his snide smirk. What do you mean, Veon? She enjoyed watching Veon Poole explain the lesson. Unlike her, it seemed that he excelled at this budgeting and the financial skills it took for running the largest kingdom. As I said, commonly the only major expenditures for the lords are their own upkeep of their keep. However, because of this, House Stark has forced them to do something with all that remaining coin. Forced them? I never thought that we forced lords to spend their money our way. Oh, we really don't think of it as forcing, more as a friendly suggestion, and the reminder that we can stop paying for the upkeep of their lands. Regardless, what this means is that the lords of the north may focus much of their coin into training and equipping their host or standing guards. So in return for paying for most of the expenses of the kingdom, our vassals agree to put much of their own surplus into training and equipping the army. I am sure that Sir Roderick can go much more in depth into the specifics, but that is the simple answer. Now again, it is a ratio for all lords. As such, poor lords may still not possess a large force, but they are still encouraged to pay their share. I never even knew this. This is very inspired, Veon suggested gleefully. She cocked her head to the side. One can say that. Admittedly, this was only instituted after Robert's rebellion by Lord Eddard. As such, there isn't a lot of historical analysis for this, but hopefully it will continue to grow as it has been. She let out a sigh she didn't know she was holding. Well then, Veon, let us finish this report. The two of them leaned forward once more to complete the reading and discussion of the parchment. Robb Stark. It had been a long day. More interesting than normal. But still quite exhausting. Riding out to the execution and riding back took up many hours of the day, not to speak of the emotional exhaustion that he received from carrying out the sentence. When he arrived back in Winterfell, he decided to follow his father's footsteps, and quietly contemplate in the Godswood. He had already cleaned the blade before leaving the village. He didn't like the thought of putting it in the scabbard with blood still on it, but it was still good to sit and think. To complete a mind-numbing task such as applying oil to a sword that didn't need it. Daisy had entered and they held each other and comforted one another, and he was subjected to less than a pleasant conversation about the financial standings of House Stark, but that had all been in the past. Now, he stood at the head of the high table. Daisy to his right, his brother to her right, and Tyrion Lannister, his guest of honor, to his left. The hall was filled with many of the local lords and masters as well as high-ranking servants and household officers. Holding up a goblet of wine, he gave a toast. My friends, please, enjoy the food and drink of my hearth. Today is a day for honoring both our guest, and yourselves. May the feast begin. A chorus of agreements were shouted back before a light-hearted tone filled the air of talking and music and more fun. As they ate, he discussed with Tyrion his travel plans. Lord Robb, I must thank you immensely for the open arms you have given me, and the warm hearth that you have sheltered me in. But I am sad to say that I must be going soon. With your leave, I plan on leaving on the morrow. He had a better idea though. Actually, my lord, I have also been giving some thought to that. You see, my brother Edwyle will be leaving Winterfell soon to inspect the reconstruction of his new seat at Moat Cailin. It was planned for him to depart in the next few days, the soonest being the day after tomorrow. I insist, stay and enjoy a few more days of a safe and warm keep before you leave on a long journey. Edwyle can escort you all the way to the moat and provide some much-needed company. He could tell the dwarf was conflicted. On one hand, he obviously just wanted to go home. Simply riding all the way to the village made him wish for Winterfell. Tyrion had been gone from the capital for many months. On the other hand, he could enjoy the privileges of residing in a keep for a few more days, have a safe escort as far as Moat Cailin, and have some company at the same time. He saw Imp smirk then. Very well, Lord Rob, but I must also insist that I may peruse the many aisles of the library here. I am a voracious reader, and it is simply a gold mine for a man like me. After some days, he began to warm to the Imp's agreeable nature, and witty banter. He gave a warm smile in return. I am sure that can be arranged, my lord. Notes. Asterisk as stated in the first set of notes, this is not really in line with my current plot, but felt it necessary nonetheless to build on to what I already created for House Stark. Asterisk so, a couple things. As mentioned, I cannot believe, in any way shape or form, that a house that is nigh on 10,000 years old, does not have some measure of financial protection. That they do not possess some great wealth hidden away. As mentioned, House Stark rarely uses it, but still, I thought it important to give a little realism to what seems to be overlooked in canon. I wanted to give them a reasonable amount of actual wealth. I know they are nowhere close to the millions of gold dragons of the Lannisters, but really, House Stark having a couple 100,000 gold dragons, after 8,000 years. Really, is it that unbelievable? Asterisk as for Samzin, it was not uncommon during the medieval era or even in Asoyaf for a husband to be displeased at the apparent lack of his own features in his children. This was a common concern, one that I thought I would be remiss not to at least mention. Chapter 18, and the walls close in. Notes. Asterisk I can see, how currently, things may work out too easy for House Stark. Bear with me. I too am a lover of a strong House Stark, but I can also not stand fanfics that make them outrageously powerful. Hard times shall befall both sides of the growing rift. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter text. 299 AC. Jon Arryn. Over the couple of months, he had begun to heal. His muscles were still weak, and he required a cane at the moment. He was unable to walk for more than a dozen or two paces, but he was getting better. When he had first awoke, he could not walk at all, his legs still failing him. It was hard some days, but not today. For today, his son would arrive in the city. Ned Stark's party had been seen marching down the King's Road. He had made it to the city safe and was being escorted in now. How Ned had managed to ensure that a majority of the Lannister guards were sent back to the west was beyond him, but that didn't matter now. For the time, he had been serving as acting hand of the king. Now, he would be able to rest. Still, when the orders from King Robert came, the Queen had been irate. With much assistance, and a great amount of time, he was able to make way to the small council chambers. He would ensure that he received Ned with the rest of the council. To his right stood the unofficial lieutenant of the Lord Hand and the small council since the days of Inizai, the Master of Laws. Unfortunately, this honor was granted to Renly Baratheon. He did not hate Renly, but the younger brother of the king was as useful as his legs at the moment. Next to him was his gruff brother, Stannis, the Master of Ships. He had nothing against Stannis, in fact, he was his most preferred councilman. His dour and humorless character was off-putting to some, but it was what he needed in the den of snakes. After Stannis stood Petyr Baelish. At one point, he had considered his vassal one of his close allies in this place, but his brush with death opened his eyes. The Valyman had caused him no offense, but he kept his eyes of the small lord. After Baelish stood the ever-serene Lord Varys. That small smile plastered on his face per usual. Lastly was Grand Maester Pycelle. Bumbling around, seemingly a day away from falling ill. Too bad the old crone hadn't already kicked the bucket. But finally the waiting ended when he heard the chambers open. Eddard Stark looked as he always had. The grim, cold, and unfeeling Northman. But he smiled when he saw him. Jon. Ned embraced him in a fierce bear hug, quite out of nature for the normally stoic quiet wolf. How have you been? Healing properly, I hope. Oh, don't worry about me, Ned. I may be old, but I have a few more days for me. Good. I am gladdened to hear of it. Next to Ned stood two people. He faintly recognized them. It was the oddest thing, it was almost at the edge of his cloudy memory, but he couldn't place it. Jon, these are my two most trusted men. This is Sir Jory Castle, captain of my household guard during my duration here. And this he put his hand on the shoulder of an aged man, grey whiskers on his cheeks. Is Sir Roderick Castle, his uncle, and the Master-at-Arms of Winterfell. That was it. He recognized them from the rebellion. Dare I say, it surprises me that you bring both your captain and your Master-at-Arms. Ned's mood soured. Yes, well, it was fortunate he sailed after me. News needed to be shared. I cannot think of what would have happened had he not reached me beforehand. He gave a confused look, but Ned just motioned it off. He whispered later to him. He was very curious as to what it was. But for now, Ned moved down the line, introducing himself to the council. Then Ned's mood shifted when he stood before Baelish. Baelish. Ned had said before he had a chance to introduce himself. He went so far as to forcibly grab the Master of Coin's hand, and rough him in roughly to a manly shake. Ned still did not let go, and the grip apparently increased if the slight scowl on Baelish's face said anything. Without saying another word, Ned forcibly pushed his hand away again, almost making the man stumble back. Ned quickly gave his name to Pycelle. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Sir Roderick eyeing his own vassal. They know something. There was an awkward silence before he finally sat down from exhaustion and held out his closed hand. Ned. I am old and tired. I must rest. But before you go, the king bid me to give this to you. I must admit I am annoyed that he decided to go for a hunt instead of receiving you. As Ned approached, he opened his hand. In his palm, lay a golden circle, with a hist holding onto it, with the pointer finger extended outward. It was the symbol of office. Eddard Stark. He only ever used Ned's full name rarely. Allow me to be the first to officially name and congratulate you at your new appointment as Hand of the King. There was a small round of applause, mostly from himself and Renly. My lords, thank you for the kind work. But let us get down to business now. And Jon smiled. Because these lords had never seen Ned Stark before. He was sure most assumed he would rest first or enjoy a feast. But no, Ned Stark, still in his riding leathers, took his place at the council table. He was amused, of course. He would leave soon, he needed to lay down again, but he wanted to watch this first. The council was standing in shock before finally Stannis Baratheon moved to take his seat. Once seated, he looked mildly impressed. Renly and Varys were quick to follow before being closed behind by Pycelle. Baelish was the last standing before taking his seat. He just chuckled and turned to walk back to his chambers. He lay in his bed, reading the tome that he had been reading before he had fallen ill. It had been a moment of great joy to see Ned once more, but he had his own investigation to see to. He just finished rereading the chapter on the Baratheon family when he heard a knock at his door. The Lord Hand to see you, my lord. One of his household guard announced. The door opened and Ned walked in, still in his leathers and furs. Godspeed, good man, have you even rested yet? There is still work to be done. Ah. He waved a hand at him. Had only Robert held to that principle. What is that you're reading? Oh, just some interest, thinking about old friends no longer with us. Ned gave him a sympathetic smile. If only you knew. He would let him know at some point, but Ned had enough trouble at the moment. What can I help you with, my son? Ned broke his stoic demeanor and looked around paranoid. Worry not, the spider may have eyes and ears, but he cannot see what is written down. Nodding, Ned silently took a scroll from his cloak, and set it before him. This arrived with Sir Roderick. He had made landfall in King's Landing last night, and made sure to catch me before I arrived at the Red Keep. Taking the letter, Jon opened the broken seal and gazed at it. Oh. Oh. Taking some parchment out, he wrote out a response. Is this true? Looking at it, Ned took the quill from him. I arrived today from Sir Roderick. He arrived last night in King's Landing and approached me before I got to the Red Keep. I am sorry, Ned. Is there any possibility, however small, that Baelish is capable of doing this? Don't lie to me, Jon, you know your bannerman like I know mine. He sat back and thought. Baelish had never caused offense. He had been nothing but a capable servant. But, he was slimy, he was sure of it. How far would he go? He had no idea, but he could see it. He has done nothing to cause confusion, but I can see the possibility. Ned read it and about shouted before John quickly put his finger up to his own lips. The walls have ears. He hoped Ned understood. Apparently he had, as Ned quickly closed his mouth. Advise. You other hand. Remove him if you want. And replace him with whom? That stopped John. He grabbed his chin in thought. Then a thought came to him. Brilliant. He quickly grabbed the filled parchment, and threw it in the blazing fire. He watched until it burnt to a crisp before he took another parchment and started anew. Ned watching curiously the entire time. Tyrion Lannister. Ned looked confused. With the Lannister guard sent back, Tywin will need concessions. Appoint his son as the new master of coin. The Queen. The two hate each other. Ned nodded. John once more took the parchment and threw it into the fire. The new Lord Hand looked at him gratefully. Thank you for the advice. It has been too long. It has. One more thing, Ned. When you have finished business with this matter. He quickly stopped himself, never knew whose ears were listening. Come find me, it will be good to reminisce about old friends. Should someone be listening, it would sound like a foster father wanting to spend time with his son. But they wouldn't have noticed the small movements of John Arryn's eyes, looking over to the large book that he had been reading. John sighed. Evidently Ned didn't know what he was talking about. But perhaps that was for the best. Eddard Stark. It wasn't until the morning after his arrival that he saw Robert. He had been summoned by his old friend to break his fast with him privately. Ned. Finally, your frozen ass finally made it. I arrived yesterday, Robert. Oh, yesterday, today, tomorrow, it doesn't matter. We need to celebrate. We'll hold a tourney for your appointment. Perhaps most men would have simply acquiesced to him. After all, Robert was king, and his word was law. But Eddard was not most men. No, Robert. A tourney now would be far too outrageous an expenditure. Oh, is that so? Is that any way to talk to your king? Robert, you asked me here because you and I are brothers. You asked me here because you told me that you trusted me, you asked me here because you wanted me to run your kingdoms for you, yes. Robert crossed his arms and let out a sigh. I may remember a few of those words. Then let me run it. He raised his voice, but it was more of a tone of begging than of yelling. I cannot rule for you if you leave me no coin to actually do it. Robert still sat, arms crossed, before he finally dropped them down to his sides. Ah, you've the right of it, old friend. I'm a terrible king. He didn't have the heart to fight it, so he did the next best thing. Then take this time to be better. Let the Maestus write of Robert the Just, the Great, not of Robert the Fat, or the Lusty. Robert gave him a hard look but relented. He did offer a smirk. Robert the Lusty does have a certain ring to it, The two old friends chuckled before silence overtook the chamber. Robert, one of the reasons for your realm being so terribly run, is at fault for the small council. Let me change the makeup, give me your leave. In what way? Eddard had to be careful about this, he wanted to replace Renly, amongst other. He would have to offer a different reason than incompetence, however. First and foremost, I would remove Renly as Master of Laws. Renly? He is barely in the Stormlands. Lord Renly is young, he must build the loyalties of his bannermen. Allow him to go back to Storm's End. Now, the time to sell it. Additionally, perhaps the king's youngest brother would enjoy the company of the king. Back at home, hunting at their ancestral seat. He saw Robert's eyes widen and he knew he had him. Ha! I'll show him how to hunt as a true man. Oh, do with the small council what you will, consider all appointments have my approval. And organize a party for Renly and me, we'll leave in the coming fortnight. Of course, your grace. It saddened him to have to use underhand tactics to manipulate his dear friend, but it was necessary. Besides, perhaps some time away from this rat's nest of a city would do his old friend good. As he walked out of the king's chambers, he made way for the Tower of the Hand. He had a few minutes before the small council meeting, and he wanted to finish up one last thing. Arriving at the main chamber, he summoned Sir Roderick and Sangza to him. Sangza, Sir Roderick, sit. Sangza, I have been discussing the betrothal to you and young Edric. He is willing to bring the Dane back to Starfall and assist him from there. You will leave in the coming days. At this he turned to the old knight. As for you Sir Roderick, I must make a special request of you. Of course my lord, what do you require? Unfortunately, I am unable to escort my daughter all the way to Dawn. I ask that you serve as Sangza's escort until you reach Starfall, at which point, you may return to Winterfell immediately. It is my honor, I shall ensure she reaches the castle safely. You have my thanks, old friend. He finished up the pleasantries with his daughter and sworn knight before once again leaving the tower and approaching the small council chambers. Entering, he saw himself as the last person to arrive. My lords, apologies, I was speaking with my household and forgot the time. No worries Lord Hand. The old maester croaked out. My lords, I must admit to you now, that I have no need to discuss the realm at the moment. We are here to discuss this council itself. He turned to the youngest Baratheon. Renly. You are hereby dismissed from the small council. You are ordered to return to your castle of Storm's End. Lord Stark, what is the meaning of this? This is highly irregular. Additionally, you are to escort your brother the king to Storm's End, where he wished to assist you in the ways to ruling and manship. Eddard interrupted him without any pause. Renly looked to argue, but hearing that this was approved by the king, made him silent. Eddard looked at him quietly until Renly got the message and stood and left the chambers. Lord Stannis. The middle Baratheon brother gazed at him, revealing nothing from his calm demeanor. My Lord Hand. The realm needs a new master of laws. I can see no one better than you to fulfill this office. Stannis Baratheon, I hereby dismiss you as the master of ships and appointed you as the master of laws. Stannis's face made it seem he was expecting the same treatment that Renly received. But now, he stood and took Renly's old chair. The first order of business. Does anyone have any suggestions on who to replace Lord Stannis as master of ships? Stannis himself spoke first. I have a man in my employ named Sir Davos Seaworth. His abilities on the water are second to none. Pycelle decided to join the conversation. I have heard of this man, he was a smuggler. Lord Hand, I suggest a lord of good station. Perhaps a farman of fair castle. Before he could respond, Stannis spoke first. Oh, you advise another Westerman. How shocking. Perhaps a Mallister or a Grafton my Lord Hand. Petter Baelish advised, though not as vocally as he would usually. Perhaps he noticed the hostility of the new hand and elected to be more subservient. Then perhaps a red wine. My lords, my lords. These are all good suggestions. I myself would like to see a Mandaeli as a candidate. I shall be blunt however, I shall not have a Grafton on this council. He turned to Stannis. And though I have heard of his Onion Knight, I am afraid that the lords would be unacceptable of a former smuggler as a member. Regardless of his skill. He is a landed knight as well Stannis tested. At the present, regardless of skill. Perhaps he can be entrusted with other duties, and prove himself to me, than be made the new master of ships. Stannis looked to disagree, probably on the grounds that other lords need not prove themselves. But he realized he would not win this time. So we have Lord Redwine, Lord Mallister, Sir Wendell Mandaeli, and Lord Sebastian Farman. The Queen is enough representation of House Lannister, we need not more. Stannis said, scowling and annoyed. Though I am fond to agree, he is still skilled, he has had to resist the Ironborn for decades. So has Lord Redwine and Lord Mallister. My lords, I will shorten the list to Lord Redwine, Lord Mallister, and Sir Wendell Mandaeli. That is all for today. Stannis Baratheon. With that, the new hand of the king abruptly stood and left the chambers. So far, Stannis was impressed with him. He was cold, distant, loyal to his brother, and held an immense dislike of the Lannisters. He had heard from Jon Arryn that it was Eddard Stark who was to be thanked for emptying the city of Lannister. He only hoped that the new Lord Hand was able enough to hold on to this grasp of power that he now held. He had been angry at the rejection of Sir Davos Seaworth. He was a landed knight, why does he need to prove himself? He had hoped that Lord Stark was a man of honor, as his elder brother oft spouted. It seemed that he was just another boring man. But he had a duty to follow the Hand's decision. But his first order of business was to establish himself as the new Master of Laws. His first goal: to wrest control of most of the administration of the capital from the slimy hands of Petyr Baelish. For some incredibly stupid reason, Jaehaerys Targaryen thought it best to put the City Watch under the authority of the Master of Coin. Why this was done is open to interpretation. On one hand, during that time, the royal treasury still had many more officers to it, including a massive mint within the city itself. Besides keeping order, part of their orders were to handle the security of the royal coffers. But much of the treasury office had been dismantled over the years. Now, it was time to change that oversight. As for Renly, he was his brother. He had ensured he had been fed and taken care of during the siege of Storm's End. And what had he done with this chance at life? Thrown it away for fine silks and sycophants. He thought him to be the mirror of Robert. At least Robert knows how to fight at the very least. He would protect his younger brother as he would his own, but he privately supported his dismissal from the council. Perhaps he did not agree with Ned Stark's methods, but at least he was trying. Just before Lord Stark left the chambers, he called out to him. "My Lord Hand." Stark turned in response and raised his brow. "Lord Stannis." "My lord, I must speak with members of my household, but may I request a meeting with you within the hour, privately?" "Of course, my lord. I shall inform my guards to keep watch for you." With a nod, Lord Stark left the chambers. In reality, he didn't need a full hour, he just needed to make arrangements to support his maneuvering. He had no doubt that Lord Stark would approve of his request. As such, he would need to move quickly to secure the City Watch from the corruption that had befallen it. Leaving through the main entrance, he found Sir Davos standing outside, waiting for him. He bowed once he saw him and stepped in line behind him as he continued to march. "Sir Davos, I require your services." "What do you need of me, my lord?" "You are to set sail to Dragonstone immediately. The island is home to 350 men at arms as well as 40 knights." They stopped once he reached his solar. Sitting behind it, he began writing a letter before sealing it with his personal sigil. "This is a letter for you to present to any who demand proof. I hereby call upon 200 of the men and half the knights to join me here. Strengthen you spine Davos, I too have sycophants amongst my halls. If my wife's family seeks to obstruct you, deal with them in any way you see fit. Should they put up more resistance, simply call upon the entire garrison to join you. Leave the barren rock to that blasted family. Am I understood?" Davos seemed to be taken aback by the quick instructions but nodded in understanding. "Aye, my lord, I shall see it done. What men do you believe may assist me?" "Jace Blackberry would be trusted, but I don't wish for him to leave. He can keep an eye out in my stead. Have Sir Hubert Rampton and his 3 sons accompany you. Any others?" "Aye, have your 2 eldest join you as well." "I'll see it done." "Good, go. Fly quick and fly true. I expect your return within the Senate." Sir Davos bowed and left. One more thing left to do. Standing, he made his way to the Tower of the Hand. He let out a sigh he didn't know he was keeping. It truly was an easier place to reside without the stink of lions all over it. Reaching the tower, he made the long journey upward. Stopping at one of the small warrior rooms along the route, a man stood in his way. His was a lithe but muscled man. He possessed unbraided and untied, shoulder-length hair. It seemed to be a dark brown. The man rested his hand on his sword's pommel. His gamison bore arms of 10 white wolves' heads. "May I help you, my lord?" the man asked him. "Yes. I am Lord Stannis, the Master of Laws. I had a meeting with Lord Stark scheduled." "Of course, my lord is expecting you. I am Sir Jory Castle, allow me to escort you." As the knight led him the rest of the way, he learned that despite his younger appearance, he had served during the rebellion and had led the Stark household guard for many years. But enough of that. They had reached the Hand's solar. Sir Jory knocked on the door before a voice answered. "Lord Stannis Baratheon to see you, my lord." "Enter." A voice called from within. Sir Jory opened the door and offered him entrance. Once he entered, the door closed behind him. Before him, Lord Stark sat behind his own desk, reading some report or another. "Lord Stannis, what can I do for you?" "I'll be blunt, my lord. I wish your leave to have the City Watch transferred to under my authority." Lord Stark didn't immediately answer, but he noticed a glint of respect in the man's eyes. "At least some here can ask for what they wish without turning into a snake. As to answer you, from my understanding, the City Watch had traditionally been under the Master of Coin's prerogatives." "Yes, and I am sure you have seen how effectual he is doing his job." Others would have called it a sarcastic response, but to him it was the simple truth. "Should I agree to this, what would be your next steps?" "I must be honest and inform you that I have sent Sir Davos back to Dragonstone to ferry much of my household guard back to city. Much of them will be used to supplant the current watch until more trustworthy members can be found. I agree with your assessment that this capital has turned into a den of lions." And then, Lord Stark hadn't changed his expression. "I would remove Janos Slynt as Lord Commander. Frankly, it is insulting that he has been allowed to be in command for this long. With your assistance, I would continue a campaign of ridding the watch of its corruption." Eddard Stark leaned back into his chair, staring into his eyes the entire time. This was the first time for both of the men. For much of their lives, they were the dutiful, honorable, quiet members of their families. They were the dependable ones, always seemingly difficult to impress. But they soon found a respect in each other. Slowly, Lord Stark leaned forward. "Very well." Stannis perked up at that. "I give you my leave. Issue the declaration immediately." Notes. **** I have found that writing for Stannis Baratheon is one of the most difficult POV characters. If any of you have written from his POV, please let me know and give any advice you can. Chapter 19, The Comings and Goings. Notes. **** So I know that we have moved forward a year, but that is only been a couple months. Not a large time different. I know that they don't use the same calendar but think something similar to December to January. Where it is a new year, but in reality, not much actual time has passed. Chapter text. 299 AC. Tyrion Lannister. If only he had been a Maester. The stories and experiences he could write about from his journeys. He had pissed off the edge of the wall, he had dined with the Black Brothers, and he had seen the majesty of the great fortress of the north. His journey home saw him beside the second son of the Lord Paramount of the North. He liked the boy, he loved his own father, but seemed to realize there was more to the world than just pure honor. And the seat he had been gifted. His own father would never see fit to bestow such a gift on him. Even battered and in ruin, Moat Cailin was a tough nut to crack. When he and Edwyle Stark had first arrived, work had already started. It had only been commenced for about a fortnight, but still, progress was progress. The army of well-paid laborers and skilled craftsmen had toiled every hour of every day, working in shifts. "Winter is coming, we cannot afford to rest when men can work," Edwyle Stark had told him. The rubble had already been cleared and those stones that were deemed fit to be used again were set aside while the others were ground up and mixed with water for rudimentary mortar. Nothing had yet to be built. But with the rubble cleared, it certainly was cleaner and more of the base of the castle could be observed. He had stayed an additional 2 days in the north with Lord Edwyle. In such time the initial rebuilding of the base was begun on the South Tower. The first to meet the south. He was ripped from his thoughts by the stench of the city that he knew was near. Oh, it felt good to be back in the south once more. He had enjoyed the offerings of the north for quite some time. But home was still home. He was surprised as he crested the hill, to see that many of the former lion banners that once decorated the city, were replaced with the black stag, upon the yellow field. Entering the city, his party of his 2 Lannister guards, and a sellsword whom he hired to complement his party named Bronn, travelled through the Gate of the Gods, and up the main portion of the King's Road. It took nearly half of the hour, but eventually, his small party arrived before the Red Keep. The change in Lannister banners was not the only thing that was evident. The closer he travelled to the Red Keep, the more the city watch seemed to change. Slowly, he observed that the golden capes melted away, and in their place, was the light and dark greys of troops from House Stark and House Baratheon of Dragonstone. When he had first arrived in Winterfell oh so many months ago, he had assumed that Ned Stark was not bred for southern courtly games. Perhaps this was true, but it seemed the Northerner ensured that no games would be played at all. After all, those sorts of entanglements can only be fought with enemies, and seemingly Ned Stark and Stannis Baratheon managed to have all the rats leave the city. He reined his horse in and managed to dismount after some time. Waiting for him in the courtyard was a man he had recognized from his initial stay at Winterfell. He had forgotten the man's name, but he was a close guard or captain to Lord Stark no doubt. Too bad he did not introduce himself. "My lord. The hand of the king has ordered me to fetch you immediately." "Can it not wait, good man? I have ridden for many months." "I'm afraid not, my lord." Lord Stark was quite insistent. "Very well. Lead me, but please, at least have an order from the kitchen be sent. My stomach growls far too loudly for my liking." He followed the man as they climbed the menaced Tower of the Hand. It was a long way up and he had not reached the halfway point when his legs began to fail him. He landed each footfall heavily, and without grace. He thought back to his memories of the wall, in the far northern reaches of the realm. How come the Maesters couldn't have one of those wall cages built here? Seriously, who thought a tower this tall was convenient? It was apparent that whoever built the tower evidently needn't to climb it, for if they had, they would have realized just how remarkably exhausting the climb was. But he was interrupted from his thoughts when he reached the top of it. He had been inside his own mind that he hadn't seen they had climbed the rest of the way. The captain of the Stark Guards banged on the door, announcing his arrival. He opened the door for him and gestured for him to continue. As he entered, the chamber was not quite as empty as he had thought. The presence of Eddard Stark was expected, but the equally as stern man sitting before him was not. "Lord Tyrion, be welcome to King's Landing. I must beg your pardon for not receiving you. There were certain matters that required my immediate attention." "Excused. If I may ask, for what reason have I climbed this monstrously large tower?" "Sit." Lord Stark pointed at the chair that was to the right of Stannis Baratheon. "You may have yet hear of it due to your travels, but Renly Baratheon was removed from the small council and Lord Stannis here has replaced him as the Master of Laws. I hope this is not an interview to place me as the new Master of Ships. I must admit, I am not particularly good at them." Lord Stark seemed amused at this quip, but Stannis simply sighed. "My lords, let us drop the niceties. There is work to be done. Please, my lord. Any more talk like that and you would remind me of my father. I am nothing like Tywin Lannister." "No, you are not." Tyrion agreed smugly. The two lords fixed eyes on one another. The Lord Hand intervened before anything else could go wrong. "My lords. Calm yourselves. Lord Tyrion, you have been called for another reason. The two of us require your assistance." "Ah. Require your assistance. I do love those words. What can I do for the great Eddard Stark and equally as temperamental Stannis Baratheon?" "Watch your tongue. Or I shall separate it for you." Stannis shot back. "Lord Stannis." Lord Stark's loud outburst surprised the both of them. "You two act like my children. Shall I take you over my leg and spank you as I would one of my own? My Lord Hand, this an outrage. Then control yourself. And as for you, I would watch your words, Lord Tyrion." The two men across of the hand of the king were suitably reprimanded. The two quietly apologized to one another, even if Stannis was much more terse and less than meaningful. Regardless, the room calmed and there was a moment of silence before Lord Stark began. "Lord Tyrion. We can handle the issue of the now empty office of Master of Ships. What we require of you is far more important." "And what may that be?" Lord Stark looked at Stannis for a moment before looking back at him. "We would have you spy on the current Master of Coin, Petyr Baelish, the Lord of the Fingers." "Oh. All the best stories start with spying. Why should I agree to this, Lord Hand? I am not ignorant to the ways of the South, as much as I detest them. Should you find that Petyr Baelish is guilty of financial malfeasance, as well as other potential crimes, Lord Stark looked at him pointedly. Then I am sure that arrangements can be made to ensure your ascendancy to Littlefinger's previous post. Spare me, Lord Stark. You would only appoint me to placate my father, who is no doubt currently frustrated at your responsibility for removing Lannister influence from the city. Yes, you have the right of it. I am not good at these games, so I usually simply do not play them. But perhaps I can promise that the debts to House Lannister shall be the last to be addressed. This might confuse most. But it seemed that not only was the Lord of the North a capable military commander, but also held a deep knowledge of financial affairs. His wish was to pay off the debt of the Iron Throne. But Tywin Lannister's greatest point of influence over the crown was not through the troops posted at the city or even through the Queen. It was through the debt owed to him. By promising to pay off all other debts first, it allowed Tywin Lannister to have some security over the realm longer than Eddard Stark would normally allow. No doubt the Quiet Wolf wished to do away with the debt altogether, but he was seemingly able to make concessions when he needed to. Though I am tempted to do such a thing because of the employment it offers me, how do you know that I would do this for my father? No doubt even you have been aware of his public disdain for me. Lord Stark looked down with a scowl. As much as it pains me to say this, wolves and lions are alike in some ways. One of these is through the pack. You may not like your father, or even Her Grace the Queen. But I would assume that you love your brother, your nephews and niece. Fine. What would you have me do? Find evidence of Petyr Baelish's many crimes. Ensure that the evidence is damning enough to at least warrant his dismissal from the council, if not more. By any means necessary. Stannis curtly added. Eddard Stark gave the Stormlander a grim look at the prospect of him not operating completely within the law, but he voiced no opposition. Very well. If that is all, my lords, Lord Stark simply waved him off. Have a restful evening, my lords. I myself shall not begin this charade until I have had a hot meal and a soft bed. Sir Barristan Selmy. He thought he had seen Robert Baratheon the happiest during his journey to the north, but this far outweighed that. The royal party had arrived at the mighty keep of Storm's End, and nearly immediately, all the banners sworn to House Baratheon sent a representative of some kind to the king's ancestral seat. It seemed that every other day the eldest and youngest Baratheon brothers went out on a hunt of some kind. At the moment, however, he was given the day off. Sir Aris had accompanied the king and the rest of the Baratheon men out into the woods. But a knight of the King's Guard never truly had a day off, as was the same today, as it was 30 years ago. He found himself in the tiltyard of the cliffside castle. He had started his training as he had always done. Before even swinging a sword, Sir Barristan made sure that he conducted some stretches. After this was done, he initiated some light sparring with the current Castellan of Storm's End, Sir Courtenay Penrose. Sir Courtenay was no match to himself, but he was an honourable and able warrior in his own right. It was after the second spar, that went to him of course, that he noticed the eyes of a young man on them. It seems we have ourselves a spy, he dryly commented. The Castellan turned to focus on what had drawn his eyes before letting out a hearty chuckle. Edric. Come over. Recognizing the name, Sir Barristan realized that the young man was none other than the eldest recognized bastard of his grace himself. Who are you, young man? Obviously the child became wide-eyed at the deep, baritone voice of the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, but he quickly reapplied a kind smile. I am Edric Storm. Sir Courtenay patted the child's back. Sir. I mean I am Edric Storm, sir. Ha ha. Calm yourself, little lorderling. Have you yet to train with the blade? I wish to, sir, but Sir Courtenay says that I am too young to use steel. I have started with the practice blades, he reported happily. Keep with it, young man. Even I once started with practice blades. Would you like to watch us as we spar? The lorderling nodded excitedly. Selmy and Penrose assumed their positions and began. He found himself in his own mind. It seemed to happen more oft recently. Perhaps it was the factors of growing older, but it saddened him in a way. He was reminded of his great victory over Maelys Blackfyr at the Stepstones. He remembered how he had spent so many years serving with honor under Aegon V and Jaehaerys II, then Aerys II came. Oh, how he loathed that man. He had been prepared to, and almost, give his life for the Mad King. To many, oaths may be simple words, but to the few men like him, oaths were serious things. His one hope was the eldest of the Mad King, Roriger. The Silver Prince, the last dragon, the prince that was promised. And yet, all hope washed away in time. Like the smiles, after Harrenhal, all hope left the realm. When he had awoken on the bed after the Battle of the Trident, he had contemplated ending his own life. It had been simple to him then. The king and the heir were both dead. The rest of the dwindling dynasty had fled the realm. But it seemed that he was as lousy as doing the deed as he was at protecting his charges, for as he was just about to do it, in walked the leaders of the rebellion. First was the wise and senior Jon Arryn. The next through the tent would be his future charge, Robert Baratheon, his own body bandaged. The last was the slippery, yet broad-shouldered Hoster Tully. He unfortunately did not have the chance to ever thank his savior. When he had awoken, Eddard Stark had already been dispatched to the capital. Once he was healthy enough to travel, the young Quiet Wolf had already left the capital to go to Dorne. After that, well, he didn't blame the young man for returning to Winterfell. He would not see the man until the Northmen's arrival at the Greyjoy Rebellion. And how did the Northmen change? From the young man, yet to have whiskers on his face, to a man who had grown, matured. The Northerners had arrived on their small, Western Fleet's ships along with the ships of the Riverlords. Perhaps it was the West that the Ironborn had attacked first, but it was the eons of rage that the Northerners repaid them in. For at every island, it was the brutal berserkers that led the van, much to the chagrin of the Southern Lords. But it had paid off. Apparently the Lord of Winterfell had changed during the crucible that was Robert's rebellion. The Quiet Wolf was known for his honor and honesty, for always showing more chivalry than most actual knights. But when a war had been declared, well, it had shocked even himself. The Wolf of the North had spared no one that he thought deserved it. From castle to castle, from holdfast to holdfast, Eddard Stark and his Northerners put on a show, for that is what it truly was. The brutality had two objectives: first, to once and for all end the threat of the Ironborn. But secondly, and he suspected far more importantly, to ward of the South. The only nicety that the Quiet Wolf had offered during the Greyjoy Rebellion was his suggestion to spare the last of Balon Greyjoy. Robert had been against it, of course, but it seemed that it had not mattered. For as the dust settled, and the bodies had been counted, it seemed the youngest son and only daughter of Lord Balon had gone missing. To this day, no one has heard either from, or of them. After the uprising, Lord Rodrik Harlaw had been appointed as the regent of the Iron Islands. And just as quickly, those of the north once more retreated to their smoky lands of old trees and even older gods. In the time since, Barristan evaluated himself. Was he really worthy? Oh, he was good with a blade, aye. Was he bold, perhaps? But was he worthy? He'd never let it show, but he had long ago concluded that he was not the knight others should look up to. If he was, he would have found a sooner method at saving Aerys from Duskendale. He would have done something to help the Queen, R'hllor, who had long suffered and deserved a life far better than she had. If he was worthy, he would have either saved Roriger, or gone down with him. He was good with a sword. But that didn't mean anything. As much as he hated it himself, he didn't think himself to have better honor than even the Kingslayer. Had he regretted his life? No, he had none of that. He had made his own decisions and he had to live by them. But that wasn't to say that he was disappointed by the outcome of his decisions. Had only Jaehaerys II not forced his children to wed. Had only Aerys II not been kidnapped and held at Duskendale. Had only Roriger have the wits to not throw the realm in turmoil when he was so close to having his father removed. Had only Eddard Stark taken the throne at the end of the rebellion. He was not an intensely pious person, but even he would have to assume that the Seven were mocking him and his entire life. He was knocked out of his thoughts as Sir Courtenay clashed his sword with his. Sansa Stark. She had long ago left the capital. In their party was Sir Rodrik, who led 20 Stark men at arms. Alongside of Lord Beric Dondarrion, who led another 20 of his own guard. Lastly was her intended, Lord Edric Dane. Already a lord in his own right after the death of his father, Edric was of normal height, with pale blonde hair and eyes of purple. Unlike her own older brothers, Edric had yet to kill somebody, though she didn't hold that against him. He was a kind young man, and most of all, he did not seem disgusted with her. She held her own beauty, but her mother had convinced her that all men would reject her due to her father's insistence at the blade. It had been some time since she last practiced, but her betrothed did not seem to object at the very least. Dawn was the hottest place she had been to in her life. Unlike the heat of Winterfell's walls or the pools in the Godswood, this was a heat that was oppressive. At least the warmth in the north felt good, to warm your heart from the cold air. But here, it was everywhere. The travel had been boring, but very informative. In reality, she had thought that Arya would have been a better fit to the sands of the south, but she was still happy at the moments that led here. There was a time when she would not accept anything less than the hand of the Crown Prince himself. Her eyes had been opened since then, however. Regardless of how sad it was, the North had a way to whittling a man or woman down to their true self. But at the moment, she did not wish to reminisce about her thoughts. Snapping her reins, she gently trotted forward so she could share words not with her betrothed, but with his own master. Lord Beric Dondarrion was an interesting man. She had heard many call him the Lightning Lord after his own arms. He was amusing, and possessed a strong sense of justice, she observed, much like her own father. Lord Dondarrion. Ah. The Lady Sansa. What can I do for you? My lord, forgive me, but it seems that I am ignorant to the reason why my betrothed was given as your ward. Young Edric, some call him Ned, though I can see how you may not like that. Regardless, Edric was not originally in my views of my life. You see, besides escorting my ward and his beautiful betrothed. Sansa reddened at that. I also come to Starfall for my own reasons. See, I myself am currently betrothed to House Dane as well. Before Edric's father passed, we agreed that I would marry his younger sister, Illyria Dane. Oh, how exciting. Perhaps we'll have 2 weddings to take place. Sansa always remembered her courtesies. Ha! Have patience, my Lady of Stark. I look forward to being of the same family as you, but enjoy your own life as much as you can now. Of course. Forgive me, my lord. Lord Dondarrion leaned over. Lady Sansa, may I make an observation? Yes, please, my lord. You must pardon my bluntness, but I understood that you were raised in Southern court protocol through your mother and Septa. Yes, that's right. Well, my lord. It is only, well, you will be marrying into one of the most powerful Dornish houses. And Dorne, much like the North, is very different than the rest of the South. Even I, a Stormlander, take some qualities from them. As we Marcher lords oft do. Now Sansa was truly befuddled. What do you mean, my lord? You must find yourself, my lady. You say what you think others wish to hear. You have your own mind, yes. Oh, I don't tell them this, but I am far smarter than many of my siblings. Lord Dondarrion smiled and looked down before continuing. Then use that mind of yours. 'Tis not the end of the world should you do. Only those lords too stupid to listen to their wives that you must fear. I hope that I have done better when raising young Edric. The sooner you learn to be your own woman, the sooner you will enjoy, and be enjoyed, here in Dorne. But, Sansa looked down in confusion. But that is what your Septa told you. I, my lord. Pardon. She nearly forgot his address. The 7 tell you one thing. The old gods something else. The king another. But perhaps the most important teacher of all is the instruction received from life. From experience. Tell me, have you heard of Olenna Tyrell? I heard of her when I reached the capital, I heard some in the king's court speak of her. Then you will have no doubt heard of her name given to her. The Queen of Thorns. Do you believe that the infamous Queen of Thorns, whom all is afraid of, seeks to please everyone? No. Quite right. No, she does not. And her direction to always speak her own mind, coupled with her skill at the game, have allowed her to be one of the most powerful women in the realm. The 2 of them turned their heads as a shout from the front of the party grabbed their attention. Lord Dondarrion was being summoned for some reason. Lord Dondarrion turned to her. Think on what we've discussed, my lady. You are a wolf of the north, not a delicate flower. Be a wolf. With that, the Lightning Lord snapped his reins to answer his summons. Chapter 20, Writings and History I. Chapter Text. Excerpts from The Military History of the Kingdom of Winter, from Branded I to Mors III of House Stark. Archmaester Hotar, published 36 years after Aegon's conquest. The greatest change in military thought came during the reign of Branded I Stark and his son and successor, Branded II Stark. Under previous kings, the main source of defensive fortifications came from easily built, wooden strongholds. Truly to this day, some remnants can be seen of this, most notably Deepwood Motte of House Glover. Yet, under Branded I and II, there was a revolution of massive proportions. While it is unclear if it ever affected Winterfell itself, as the legends surrounding such a castle have yet to be proven, certainly under these kings of winter, there was a recorded rise in reinforced structures and reconstructions of many houses, keeps and castle. Though many records have been lost to time, with the assistance of my brother, Maester Borwin of Winterfell, some still survive in the library of the castle. The most recorded castle can also be considered the most important, Moat Cailin. First entrusted to House Cailin by Errol IV Stark, the moat was supposedly originally a great wooden keep of ironwood. Yet, under the command of Branded II, Lord Mors Cailin ordered the great castle to be rebuilt using granite and other stronger materials. This was just one example of what seemed to occur all over the Kingdom of Winter. Excerpt from Chapter 1, Wood and Stone. No doubt House Stark reached its lowest point during the reign of Edric II Stark. The work done by his ancestors was sorely wasted on the unusually lavish tastes of the spoiled King of Winter. Due to his great spending, some mighty houses revolted against his rule during a particularly harsh winter, in what seemed to be 437 back. Among these rebellious houses was House Cailin. We can never truly understand why one of House Stark's most loyal vassals would rebel, but there are some theories, the most likely being that House Cailin could count on marriages from House Stark. According to records, they received a Stark son or daughter at least once every 3 generations. Yet at the time of Edric II, the house had not received a Stark in nearly 7 generations, thereby leaving Lord Creguard Cailin feeling forgotten. In time, this rebellion was put down under the command of Crown Prince Rickon Stark and Houses Umber, Karstark, Sewin, and Tallheart. The last to fall was House Cailin. Such an impressive fortification meant a longer period of besieging it. By the end of it, Lord Donner Umber, the Lord of Last Hearth, and Lord Harlon Karstark, the heir to Carhold, had died, along with the entirety of House Cailin. Since the siege of Moat Cailin of 436 back, the moat has laid in ruin. One lucky lord after another being gifted it, never being able to fully rebuild it. Excerpt from Chapter 3, Gateway to the North. Far from the bronze arms and armor used by Bran the Builder, after the coming of the Andals, the North adopted their materials of iron and steel. Jon 9 Stark initiated a policy of rearming House Stark's host with all steel weapons and armor. All this did not come from nothing, however. Many in the North still detest the coming of the Andals, yet were it not for them, the full potential of the North may not have been realized, as dozens of major iron mines grew throughout the North. By the time of His Grace's landing at the Blackwater, the North supplied nearly a quarter of all iron used in the 7 kingdoms. Early records from Jon 9's successor, Jon Olv Stark, indicate that the standing host of the Kingdom of Winter was the following: 4 footmen, 1 steel-tipped pike, 1 steel-arming sword, 1 iron dagger, 1 wooden shield, banded with iron, a half-helm of steel, and chainmail of steel with leather layers and padding. Their horsemen were equipped with much the same, however their pikes were replaced with lances, and they were given more plates of steel, though not as much as knights have. Since this time, the equipment of House Stark has done nothing but improve, admittedly not by much, however. Footmen under Torrhen Stark, the first Lord of Winterfell under His Grace the King, have been reorganized into 2 separate groups, Heavy and Light Foot. The Heavy Foot are still equipped like their former soldiers, this time with additional steel greaves, bracers, and pauldrons. They still use chain and leather for most of their protection. Lightfoot are equipped with almost all leather besides steel mail, as well as a leather cap. The horse has currently been the same. Excerpt from Chapter 11, Glittering of Steel. The hammering of the Riverlands is truly amongst the Winter Kingdom's greatest military and in fact political triumphs. There were a total of 3 such occasions, each known as the Successive Hammering. The most well known, however, is the second hammering of the Riverlands. Brandon 16 Stark, grandson of Rickon 11 Stark, who was mentioned in Chapter 3, called his banners after House Hoare and House Durrandon, made an alliance and marched north in an attempt to conquer the southern reaches of the north. The main force was pushed back at Moat Cailin, at this time under the lordship of House Towers. In response, the host raised by Brandon 16 marched south. Their first objective was to demolish the reinforcements sent by House Durrandon. At the Battle of Long Road, the two armies met. 30,000 Northerners met a host of 28,000 Stormlanders. The battle was fierce, but the Stormlanders eventually retreated after their commanders were slain in the battle. The North still survived with about 21,000 troops. Though it was the only great battle in the South during the war, it is not what made the war famous. At the previous Battle of Moat Cailin, the entirety of the Riverlands host was decimated. Under the foolish leadership of the Ironborn-turned-Riverlords, they left no host to remain in their own lands. As such, after the Battle of Long Road, there was no more great obstacles in the region. Brandon 16 and his nephew and heir, Roderick Stark, agreed that they should never have to be attacked from the Riverlands again. As such, uncle and nephew led raids all over the region, burning villages, salting fields, and literally dismantling castles brick by brick till it was not possible for the Riverlords to wage war for at least a century if not more. To this day, there is still a large feeling of enmity between the Riverlands and the North. Excerpt from Chapter 8, Methods of Men. One cannot examine the North's history at arms while inherently disregarding the culture of the North. Certainly the Northern culture breeds beliefs in honor, courage, battle greed and a thoroughly martial attitude about life. I myself am among the unique here in the Citadel, for before I joined my brothers, I had served as a warrior alongside my brother, the Lord of Hornwood. I, if I may say so, have a personal understanding of this particular topic. You see, dear reader, many in the South view the Northerners as nothing more than barbarians. And perhaps the way they dress and conduct themselves in courtly matters, it can be understood. Yet, it would not be right to say that the North is barbaric over the views of warfare. After all, there is a reason that despite the Reach being able to field a host of nearly 100,000, only the North did not fall to the Andals. In the South, 'tis normal for knights to be raised on the ideals of courage and honor in battle, yet many lords and most small folk do not share these ideals. This is not to blame them, of course. Why fight with honor when one can fight to win? However, this has also bred, in some places, a greater concept of cowardice. Unless expressly ordered to, a northern warrior will never retreat or step back in a battle. And unlike the South, this code is shared by small folk and lords alike. This ferocity, this nearly fanatical belief in true warfare is the greatest weapon of the North, not the swords or the spears. Further, this belief is only tied with the near worship levels of loyalty to House Stark of Winterfell. It differs greatly from house to house. Houses Mormont, Flint, Nori, Val, Dustin, and Umber practically worship the ground that a Stark walks upon. Houses Ryswell, Sewin, Tallheart, Hornwood, Glover, and Karstark are quite devoutly loyal to House Stark, though perhaps not to the point of worship. There are some outliers such as House Bolton or the now extinct House Towers, but these houses are few and far between. This combination of battle fury and complete submission to their liege lords, make the northern host a very dangerous enemy. Even outnumbered, they possess a great enemy. Where the fanatical loyalty to House Stark originated, no one truly knows. Perhaps 'tis the fact that House Stark still follows the old ways, the only lord paramount to do so. This is evident in that many in the north, especially the Umbers, the Mormonts, and those of Skagos, still refer to the Starks as Magna, instead of Lord. The old tongue word for lord. On the other hand, it could come from the long line of able and honorable Stark kings. Oh, this isn't to say the North hasn't had terrible kings, of course, after all they are still people as well. Besides arrogant and spoiled kings such as Edric II and mad and tyrannical kings such as John V and Moors II, for the most part, House Stark has served as able administrators, honorable warriors, and the defenders of the old gods, very important to the North. This is but a number of theories. Many of my colleagues here at the Citadel believe that it was a combination of these theories, coupled with their evolution over many centuries, which led to the loyalty to House Stark, rarely found by any other great house in any of the Seven Kingdoms. I am of mind to agree with this conclusion. Excerpt from Chapter 9, Stark and Their People. Wars are not just fought with arms and armor, of course. Indeed, a great deal of the important affairs of warfare lie in finance and logistics, so important that I deemed it necessary to name this chapter over such a simple concept. Let us examine the financial importance of warfare. Important to not just the North, paying for soldiers, equipment, and supplies is a rot that infects all the kingdoms of Westeros and indeed Essos as well. Though each house of the North possess their own avenues of revenue, including the private domain of House Stark, this work shall only examine that revenue that is raised by the entire kingdom, administered of course by the Starks. The main aspects of revenue come from husbandry, lumber, mining, and trade. Without doubt, dear reader, the North is capable of agricultural pursuits, however this field is mainly focused on the private sustenance of the Lord and his people. Indeed, in many harsh winters, should there be extra, it is quite common for lords to simply hand out food stores. As such, though it is a major producer, agriculture is not considered a major economic strength of the North. What the former Kingdom of Winter does excel in, however, is husbandry. Most of this comes in the form of sheep and cattle. Northern wool is dense and warm. Often traded with Braavos and other free cities, it is used for rugs, shawls, cloaks, capes, and many other uses. Northern leather works are also of high quality as well. Often sought out by those of the Vale, the Westerlands, and Braavos. Regardless of the quality and demand of husbandry products, it is the North's least profitable source of revenue. What the North is truly known for is their lumber trade. The North possesses the largest source of ironwood in the known world and have strict decrees in place to ensure the continued supply of the wood as well. It can be compared as the following: Valyrian steel is to steel, as ironwood is to wood. In fact, there is not a place in the known world that doesn't wish for the incredibly strong wood. But it is not just the substance itself that the North makes profit off of, but also the knowledge of how to use it. Houses Forrester, Whitehill, and Glover, as well as House Stark themselves, are the only group in the entire world that know how to fell an ironwood tree as well as work it in a way to use for ships, tools, arms, and other things. The trade of ironwood is only surpassed by the leasing of ironwood workers, most notably in the shipyards of Braavos. The last major source of revenue is the many iron mines that dot the North. The Westerlands are known for their gold mines, silver mines are known all over Westeros, as are iron mines in fact. But the greatest source of iron is found in the highlands of the North. I shall touch on such a resource in Chapter 11. But just as a surplus in coffers are important to warfare, so too are the logistics of warfare. Admittedly, the North does not possess a great road system. There are major thoroughfares, but these only connect the most notable to locations such as Moat Cailin to Winterfell, White Harbour to Winterfell, and the Wall to Winterfell. Besides these, there are no major roads throughout the kingdom. It is indeed a slow process to raise a mighty host, however once raised, it is the skill at leading such a host that truly is an important aspect of warfare. Before I pledged my oaths to the Order, I was once a member of House Hornwood of the North. Even in a smaller house such as they, even young lords are taught the importance of logistical warfare. As many hours are spent in the tiltyard by young lords are also spent in the keep, speaking of and testing different hypothetical battles and wars, tested on their ability to organize and move an army while protecting such things as the baggage train and conquered lands. It is an important skill, one that those in the Westerlands are taught as well. Besides the two kingdoms, however, it is not considered a good investment of time and many commanders must learn through experience. Not a terrible teacher, but one that does not need to be necessary. Excerpt from Chapter 2, Finance and Logistics. Chapter 21, The Golden Lion and the Quiet Wolf. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. 299 AC. Eddard Stark. He had just finished dealing with Court, sat upon the metal monstrosity, when the Imp of Lions approached him. He had requested to meet in private. "Shall I have Lord Stannis fetched?" he had asked. The Imp did not care, so as the two climbed the Tower of the Hand, he had one of his household guards go to the quarters of the Master of Laws. While they waited for their third member, the icy quiet wolf and the jovial little lion enjoyed a shared ale, and humorous stories, mostly on the part of the Imp. Then, a knock came. "Enter." Opening the door, Stannis Baratheon walked into the chamber. "My Lord Hand, you called for me." "Yes. It appears in the days following our previous arrangements, it seems Lord Tyrion was able to finish his investigation." Very well. Stannis curtly responded, taking a seat next to Tyrion. Lord Tyrion, please, share with us what you know. Reaching to his wine, to wet his throat before he spoke, Tyrion drank deeply. With the assistance of my good man Bronn. Who? Stannis unceremoniously interrupted. A sellsword that I met on the road south. We shared some wine together in a tavern and enjoyed each other's company. I agreed to take him into my service. Back to my point, I was able to both bribe, threaten, coerce, and pleasure certain individuals to learn all I need. And what have you discovered? That Petyr Baelish is as crafty as he is charismatic. For the most part, I was befuddled at every step of this process. Even some bribes did not work on those expected. In complete honesty, my breakthrough did not come until I went to seek my own private pleasure in one of the brothels of the city. Spare us from details, my lord. Stannis commented. Apologies, my lord. I know it has been some time since you have enjoyed the pleasures of the flesh. Oh, he had gone too far. Over a year ago, it had been announced that Lady Slyss had perished on the birthing bed, leaving Stannis a widower with his only surviving child, Lady Shireen. Lord Tyrion, you go too far. Stannis replied hotly. He had even stood and laid a hand on the pommel of his blade. Stannis. Calm yourself. As for you, Lord Tyrion, I cannot always shield the fury, you'd best watch your tone. Eddard commented in an icy and cold voice. Both men looked at him and relaxed. His own children thought that it was his voice that was able to command such respect or loyalty. It was, in some part, but not completely. His father had once taught him and Brandon about the Stark eyes. A man like Tywin Lannister would harden his gaze, to incite fear or demand respect from those he gazed upon. However, the gaze of the Starks was something even more terrifying. Complete and utter apathy. When others looked into the hardened eyes of a true Stark of Winterfell, it was difficult not to shudder. It was not anger or disappointment that was held in the eyes. It was nothing more than a simple understanding. It was the uncaring attitude. That whoever held the misfortune of receiving that gaze, knew that in the eyes of the Stark, they meant nothing. They could be dealt with as one deals with a pest. There was not hatred, but a simple understanding, that they meant nothing to the Stark. 'Twas almost like looking into the eyes of a dead man, the eyes betrayed nothing, and expected everything. Tyrion, continue. Regardless, while I was enjoying the pleasures of a woman, she let it slip where Littlefinger kept his records. Immediately, I had Bronn assist me in breaking into the small room and scavenging everything of use. I have spent the last day going over the records. And what was found? That Petyr Baelish may be the greatest robber in the history of Westeros. According to his own books, he has been able to siphon gold and others' treasure from the taxes of lords, as well as steal from the Iron Bank while signing as the Iron Throne, thereby leaving him without any of the threat. Both he and Stannis sat back in their chairs. And this evidence, it is safe, yes. It is under the personal care of Bronn at the very moment. Yet he's a sellsword. What is to say that he will not betray you for Littlefinger? Because I once promised him that whatever someone offers him, I shall double it. And should I refuse to pay him afterwards, that he may slay me where I stand. Eddard did not like sellswords, but he relented. How another man dealt with one was none of his business, at the moment. Very well, you have my thanks, Lord Tyrion. Make sure you present yourself in court on the morrow. I am sure you will understand. Of course, my Lord Hand. Both the imp and the Lord of Dragonstone stood and made for the door when he called out. Lord Tyrion, a word in private. Stannis looked between the both of them before leaving himself. Tyrion sat back down in his chair and poured himself more wine. You have my thanks on this matter. Have you had any luck of finding evidence of his other crime? He could tell that Tyrion was confused for a moment before his eyes widened. Apologies, my Lord Hand. I was barely lucky enough to find this evidence. I must regret to inform you that I have not found evidence for what befell your injured wolf. I am happy about this development, but I cannot fault you for not finding all the evidence. I am curious. If I may, Lord Stark, how are you going to deal with Baelish? And Tyrion saw why the wolf was the most feared predator. Because Eddard Stark wore a grin. And the icy Lord of the North never grinned. You shall find out with the rest of the court on the morrow. But I am sure that Baelish will not like it whatsoever. All rise for Lord Eddard Stark, Hand of the King. Sir Jory called out. Eddard entered not from the small alcove from beside the Iron Throne, but rather from the main entrance, electing to walk the entire distance to the throne. The room was silent apart from the stomping of armored guards flanking Lord Stark on both sides. Reaching the bottom of the steps, he took a silent, deep breath in before releasing it. He slowly climbed the steps and turned to sit on the ugly chair. My lords, I must apologize, but today cannot be open to normal court. For today, this court has been summoned